Hello and welcome to the Bond Revisited podcast with me, Tom.
And me, Joe.
The podcast where we rewatch the Bond films one by one, discuss them, and then rank them alongside the other Bond films to build our own definitive list for the Bond franchise. You are listening to episode 6, where we'll be revisiting the film on Her Majesty's Secret Service. So last week, we had You Only Live Twice, big film, big deal, especially because it's the last time we're going to see Sean Connery as Bond. He did his last film, he finished his contract, and now it's the George Lazenby and Roger Moore era.
So, excuse me. Actually, we got one more goodie coming up.
It's a new Bond, right? How many films does this one do? Like 5, 6?
Yeah, he loved it. He loved it. In fact, he was too old by the end. He was way too old for the role.
Yeah, he sucked in A View to a Kill. He really lost it by that point. So this is a very different film, of course. It's not even just the George Lazenby thing, which we're almost certainly going to get into. It's also the fact that it's like a different director, Peter H. Hunt, right?
Peter H. Hunt.
Was it Hunt?
I think, yeah.
No, it can't be H. Hunt. What are we talking about? Peter R. Hunt, sorry.
Yeah, Peter Hunt, who I got mixed up with someone else. Because I think isn't there another Peter Hunt that was like the set designer or something? Anyway.
Potentially. I mean, the credit sequences are so... I'm not looking at the names. I won't lie.
But yeah, I think he was second director for some of the previous films. And they basically said, like, look, we'll give you one to do eventually. And then someone dropped out of directing this one, so they said, fine, go on in, have this one.
Yeah, which was very nice of them. But then he never came back. They were like, yeah, I got mine. Thank you. Good luck on the rest of it.
This film is cursed. One-time appearances.
Yeah, apparently. I don't know. But I was quite looking forward to looking into this one because, as you know, I ranked this one as number 5 in my pre-rankings in the top films. Although I was a little bit unsure about that or this film and From Russia With Love. But I gave it to this film due to just how unique and different it was. And even though I couldn't remember a ton of details about this film, rewatching it again, that's the thing that really stood out to me. And it's quite nice to know that I was right, because watching this film, wow, is it unique and different for a James Bond film.
Yeah, unique is a good word.
Oh, no.
Unique, maybe not. Maybe we're thinking of that in different ways, though. Let's just say that. I had no real opinion of this film beforehand. As you say, it's the one with George Lazenby. It's the one with the one Bond actor. The one with the weird Blofeld. Actually, they're all weird in their own way. But or the different Blofeld, I suppose. But the one thing I didn't know about this film is that back in 1969 when it came out, I think the reviews were mixed. And I think ever since then, and especially more recently, sort of contemporary reviews, it's like shot up in people's rankings. This film like suddenly has taken on its own little like world of its own in terms of popularity.
Yeah, you definitely see that. I remember the first time hearing that, and I was reading the same kind of Wikipedia article you probably was before this.
No.
But I do remember reading this back in the day about how Christopher Nolan says this is his favorite Bond film. And I remember reading that back when Inception was coming out, because he was specifically talking about the connections between this film and Inception and saying, yeah, that's my favorite Bond film. And that was the first time I had really heard that, and heard that this film had kind of this own, reputation and was very much, maybe this is an overused term, but cult classic among Bond fans. But yeah, I remember hearing that. I was like, okay, cool. But I didn't actually really get to watching it again until I was, years ago, rewatching all the Bond films. And I remember liking it at the time, although it was sandwiched between like You Only Live Twice and Diamonds Are Forever. So that kind of probably doesn't help the film in terms of being memorable in that way.
Yeah, definitely one that's probably seen as being overlooked. And I think now is... maybe I would say it's gone too far the other way, but I guess that's what we're going to be discussing. No more of this.
This ends today.
It will, because we will be discussing, and I do have some thoughts, and they're not nice ones. I'm sorry. Sorry,
what?
George.
Oh, no. Well, if you got 3 hours spare, let's maybe get into it.
Maybe even 4. Let's find out. It's a long film.
It's a long Bond.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, let's get into the film then. Let's not waste any time. So, straight away, we have the Bond intro, the circles coming across. But there's like a couple of tweaks to it that I didn't really understand the purpose. So the first one is that the circles come across, and instead of it going straight to Bond coming out, like, you know, usually they go left to right, and then Bond comes out from the right. But this time they like stop and they show the producer's name in the circles instead.
Really?
Yeah. Did you not notice that?
No, you focus a lot on the dots, which is the right thing to do because this is a Bond podcast. I think at that point I'm just like still settling in, getting my drink ready, and oh, they're gone. It's like missed them. Never mind.
You hear the gunshot, like, oh, I'm paying attention. I'm here.
Oh, right, yeah, the podcast.
But no, I think it might have been an opportunity that they saw us like, right, okay, Sean's gone, guys. We as the big wig producers can get our names in there now, and no one's going to say anything because it's George Lazenby. So it's like, it's just odd that they changed it because they were still very much trying to mimic that and recreate that and make it feel like Bond. It's just, no, let's get our names in there to begin with.
So was it, I mean, I guess it wasn't that distracting, but just odd.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. Like, it's totally fine. It's just like, I think they just saw their opportunity to, like, they were allowed to change it, so they did change it. And it's kind of like, well, you didn't really need to do that, could you? If you want to have people be like, okay, this is still the same James Bond I know, just keep it the same. Like, you don't mess with it.
That's going to be a recurring thing that we'll be talking about, I think, is that idea of them wanting to tell the audience that, hey, this is the same character. Lots of examples of that coming up.
Mm-hmm. And also, I think the other change, and I don't know if this is actually, I can't quite remember, but this film features like a different version of the Bond song, where I don't know what the instrument is, but I'm pretty sure there's like a different instrument that's been introduced that plays part of the melody, and I want to say it plays during this opening bit as well.
Oh, okay. I didn't notice that either.
Oh,
what I did notice, I was watching, I promise. I was looking at the walk, obviously, like the Bond walking across, and for all of my misgivings of George Lazenby, it does have a good stride and a good kneel and shoot for the gun barrel. I think it does a good job with that.
I've got to disagree.
Oh,
I don't want to get controversial and combative straight away, but I thought he looked quite awkward. And I don't know if it's just due to how tall he is and that build of his that it doesn't really kind of match up. But, you know, Bond walking across the screen, you want a certain level of confidence there and things like that, but I didn't quite get that from him. Again, not really a big deal, but he felt a little clumsy to me coming out and doing the shot.
Wait, clumsier than Sean Connery wobbling on his knee? That's the thing I was comparing
his charm, innit? That's all part of it, right?
You love him for it, yeah.
Little shaky Sean. Oh, it's Bond, he's back.
Shaky, sweaty Sean.
Yeah, I don't want gingerly walk George. It's not for me.
All right, no bullying now. Come on. He's still alive, all right?
Yeah, it's true, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he's still going.
So we go from that and we cut to London and we cut to M's office and we get a really nice little moment here. Not much gets really said plot-wise or anything too important, but it's M and Q just kind of having a chat in the office. And I couldn't tell you what Q's saying to him. I think he has like a magnifying glass, but it was actually really nice to see M and Q interacting without Bond being there.
That is true. Although I'm kind of with you. I have no idea what Q is talking about in this scene. I had to replay it a couple times because he's talking about lint or some sort of dust.
Yeah.
And I was like, hang on, is this going to be related to the plot later on? I don't remember radioactive dust in the plot, but yeah, it was very strange. You're right in that regard of seeing life at MI6 when Bond's not there. But it was just very, very strange intro to the film. I was like, what? Am I missing something? No, we're talking about dust. All right.
I think they're just trying to reinforce that Q is probably the most boring man in the world.
Probably.
Yeah, but M's just too polite to be like, just Q, just go away. Like, just go back to Q branch. Go back to the basement. We put you there.
Yeah. I feel like Q and M probably have a nice relationship outside of MI6. They go for a pint, one of those old glasses with the little dimples on it, and go talk about state secrets over a bag of pork scratchings.
That sounds lovely.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. But alongside them, we also have Moneypenny in her office. And basically, after Q gets done talking about Dust, they're all saying, like, where's 007? Where's James Bond gone? We don't know. Moneypenny's like, I don't know where she is. But then we cut to somewhere tropical. So I think this was quite a smart move on their behalf, where these characters are, a pretty big part of the franchise. And rather than just straight away showing George Lazenby and stuff, they instead go to, it's M, it's Q, it's Moneypenny. They're all paid by the same actors, and they're all in the same locations you know and love, and they're talking about James Bond. And, I think it was smart. It's a very small detail, but I think a good one to start things off.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. A little buffer, a little familiarity buffer before we get straight onto George.
So, talking about getting straight onto George, so we go to somewhere tropical, with palm trees and beaches and things like that. And we get the Bond theme play again, which is, it's just another example of like, hey, they're really reinforcing the idea of, hey, this is still a Bond film, this is still the one.
They use it a lot, the Bond theme in this one. A lot.
Yeah, like outside of Doctor No, this is probably the second most use. If only there was more airport scenes, I think we would have heard it a few more times.
We get hotel scenes, which is probably the second most, so it's all right.
They should have started on a hotel. If they wanted to make us feel familiar, like, oh, this is a Bond theme, he should have started in the hotel.
Yeah, pick up the phone, get followed by some sneaky-looking person. Oh, it's a Bond film. Gotcha. Okay.
Oh, yeah, I've seen this one.
Yeah, I know what I'm in for.
So the Bond theme is playing, and we have some guy in a car driving along. They don't explicitly say it's Bond, but the fact that everyone was talking about Bond and the Bond theme is playing, you're like, yeah, okay, that's Bond. And he's driving along. He takes a cigarette, lights it up. You get a nice zoom in on the mouth.
Yeah. Did it make you think of the Family Guy? Smoke. Are you smoking yet? It's just like so many close-ups of the cigarette. It's just like, look at this, smoking so cool, kids. You should do it. It's just like so obvious in the camera.
I don't remember that episode, I'm afraid.
Oh, never mind.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess you're right, though, when you're saying about the cool thing, that they're trying to show off Bond as being cool without actually showing his face.
Yeah.
Like, it's a little bit it's a cool car, it's in a tropical setting, he's smoking. And I don't know if you can see how he's dressed, but I think you do get a little bit, like, he's well dressed. It's like, yeah, this is Bond doing his thing.
Yeah, it's definitely something that is... I'm now trying to think about all the Bond actors. I think they're all sort of done in this way where it's a little bit mysterious at the beginning. You don't quite see the full face at first, or it's just a glimpse. I'm not sure about Roger Moore, come to think of it, but I know the others are definitely like that. And given this was the first example of that, of a change in actor, I guess it makes sense to do this kind of big build up to it. I think maybe it was a little bit much. Like, at some point, I'm just like, yeah, right, just get on with it. But yeah, it was fine.
Yeah, so here's what I find kind of odd about this. So we'll skip ahead a little bit here, where he's basically driving along. He gets overtaken by a woman in a red car and basically follows her because it's the James Bond you know and love. If he sees a woman in a car, he's going to find her. He's going to get her.
Oh, yeah.
And then basically looks at her through the scope. But quite shortly after this is when they show off Bond and they show off George Lazenby as Bond. But the actual shot where they first show him is just like this, is when he gets out of the car, and it's just like this underneath shot looking upwards. But you can clearly see his face, but it's not like, the Sean Connery reveal where he's sitting on the table smoking in the tux and things like that, and then you get a full shot of him saying, I'm Bond, James Bond. Instead, the first look you actually get is like this very rushed shot, and I'm not quite sure why they put that in there and why they didn't make it a little bit more of a moment when you actually get to see the full look of George Lazenby as Bond.
Yeah, well, especially when that first full look is like that's meant to be the shot because it's the James Bond line. So, I mean, I didn't particularly, that shot didn't stand out to me, the one you're referring to, but I can see how, yeah, Like in retrospect, that was a bit of a strange decision.
Yeah, it didn't stand out that much to me either, but I saw it and I was like, yeah, that's just George Lazenby. Like, completely, like, you put in all this effort to make sure he was hidden so you could have a reveal, but then they just didn't do that. It's a bit odd.
Mm.
So Bond is basically, looking at this woman who's now walking into the ocean. He's watching them through a scope, which is like a sniper scope, I think it's supposed to be. Like, he's got I think it's the rifle from Russia with Love, I want to say, the one that he assembles in that film.
I wouldn't be surprised, actually, with all the callbacks, yeah.
Yeah, like, I don't know for sure, but you definitely see the gun and you see how he's pulled the scope off it, and it's definitely that one that looks like a bit disassembled. So he's looking through the scope at this woman, and she walks into the ocean, and which is when Bond gets out the car. You get a look at him stepping out the car, and then he runs into the ocean, and all you see is the back of his head. And maybe this is why I think he was a bit awkward and off in the circles, because this is a very bad way to introduce a new Bond, having him run like in a straight line at the ocean. This was just mean. Like, he did not look very sophisticated and cool running like this.
I know what you mean, because I did spot it too, and I did think as I was watching, is it unfair to criticize his run? But then I remember, like, Sean Connery was chosen because of his walk, or that helped. Like, he had a really good walk. Well, that's so the story goes anyway. So you'd think if that was the case, they would have maybe given him some more direction about how to run. Like, it is Bond, right? So it's got to look good.
Well, I don't think it's really fair on George Lazenby at all, because running across the beach is, like, most people are probably going to look a bit awkward, right? That's not an easy thing to do. Uneven ground where your foot sinks. Like, it's just kind of like a bad setup to have someone run across this straight away.
Now I'm picturing if he fell over. He just tripped. Yeah.
But it's like, although again, to be against George Lazenby here, he does like flap his arms quite weirdly. I know this is such a weird thing to kind of focus on and talk about, but this is the first impression of George Lazenby as Bond, and they kind of mess it up and kind of don't really do a very good job with this opening scene, and it kind of it's all in the details, where Sean Connery's introduction is all in the details. It's all very subtly built up, and it's quite a simple scene, but a very effective one, and it's really smartly built up, and he gets to sit there all confident like. But not George Lazenby. They approach it differently, but I think they wanted it to have a similar impact, and it just kind of doesn't.
I think it's just too long. Like, the longer it is, the more chance you have of these little kind of weird moments, or moments where, like, oh, you can clearly see who it is, and just, I think short but sweet is the best way to do that. Because if it's too long, then you notice how long it's been, and you think, right, this has got to be good, and then you see stuff like that, and you think, oh, all right. So yeah, I like the idea of what they were doing, but I just think it was, as you say, not very well implemented.
No, I think all you needed to do, because I think the car stuff is fine.
Yeah,
all you
the
need
car
to
was
do.
great.
Yeah, the car stuff's good. All you need to do is have him step out of the car and have that be it, and then just go blown or whatever, and there you go. You're done.
Yep.
You get the Freddy shirt out. You're like, that's James Bond. I know the guy.
Love that Freddy shirt.
So here's something that I didn't pick up on. So basically, the reason why Bond is running towards this woman is because she's like walking into the ocean, but apparently she was meant to be killing herself.
Yeah.
I didn't pick up on that when watching it.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
I mean, I guess it's kind of obvious looking back on it, but I thought like she was just having a swim and it just went a bit wrong.
He just goes and grabs her.
Yeah, it's Bond, right? That's what he does. So I thought he was running in to help her, and I think she needed help, but I didn't quite get that she was depressed and trying to kill herself. Maybe it's just because of the way the exchange goes afterwards. But I don't really get that sense of somebody who's like suicidal for the rest of the film.
So when did you pick up on that?
When I read it on Wikipedia after I watched it.
Oh, okay. So at no point in the film. Oh, I see. All right, okay.
Yeah, I just missed that detail. Just missed it.
Well, yeah. I mean, he runs in, grabs her. She's obviously not happy about this. She wants to go walk in the sea, but eventually gets her back onto the shore, which is then when you get the whole, what I think is meant to be like the proper shot of George Lazenby with the Bond line, and then as soon as that happens, bam, gets attacked straight away, wasting no time.
Oh no.
I can't remember how many. I think it's like 2 or 3 men, henchmen, goons. And so the lady, who we don't know who this is yet, she runs off, and he really quickly gets into this fight. And what I'm a little bit disappointed by with this film, and it starts kind of from the get-go, is the fighting has kind of gone back to that style from Thunderball, which I didn't like, which is very hard cuts and not, jump cuts and not matching up. This one isn't the worst in the film by any means. It gets worse later on to me. But yeah, it's like straight away we're getting into this really choppy style, which I think obviously the editor liked doing, but is not for me. And a lot of flips. Did you notice there was just a lot of flipping?
I noticed the flips.
So many flips.
I know it's something that has happened in other Bond films, but I think this one, I didn't count them. Maybe I should have done. But yeah, there's lots of just like quick flips. Someone just gets flipped in the air and falls down like all the time.
Yeah.
Because he's fighting one guy in the ocean. Well, I think the other guy might be going for the woman or going for Bond. And then Bond drowns that dude. And then basically has another fight. But something that I will also say about the fist fights, I completely agree what you're saying about the editing. It is back to Thunderball. In some ways, I would say they're better than Thunderball, because I feel like I still got a good sense of the fight. It just felt like incomplete, where Thunderball, I would just get completely lost. It was like, I don't even know what I'm looking at. Like, why? Like, everyone would just flip positions in between ones, where this one, I think, were better put together as to make it cohesive. It was just like, well, you just took out a load of stuff you didn't need to take out just for the sense of speed, and now it doesn't work. But the music, I can't remember what the music was for this one, but it was kind of bad. And
I can't remember either.
Yeah, and maybe I'm showing my hand a bit too early here, but something that's very odd, and I had to look this up. I was like, is this still John Barry? Because this might be the worst score we've had for the whole series.
Ooh.
Outside of the main themes, the focal themes and stuff, any music outside of that, we've got like a new version of the Bond theme that is just unnecessary. And everything else, the music was just really kind of limp, and I didn't really like it. And it just didn't really have that same bombastic, big sound that John Barry would always bring to these films. And overall, I would say it was quite disappointing.
I would probably agree with that, but only because, like, looking through my notes, in most of the previous films we've watched so far, I have usually pointed out or wrote down if I enjoyed the music, and I did not write anything about the music for this one.
That's not right.
Stood
like,
out to
not
me.
when it's been so good when John Barry's on board. And again, I'm surprised it was John Barry. I was expecting to look it up and find like somebody else did it as a placeholder, just a shoe-in, just because it was different. But no, it was still him. It just didn't have the same feel as a normal John Barry soundtrack.
Yeah, not good. But we're getting to a controversial point in Bond history now, and I'd be keen to hear your opinion on it. So after he's dealt with these goons from nowhere, the woman has run up. She's gone back to her car and driven off. And this is where you get the infamous breaking of the fourth wall with George Lazenby looking at the camera and saying, "This never happened to the other fella." So I wanted to know what you thought about that.
So I like that they're drawing it out, or pointing it out a little bit and having a little bit of fun with it. I like the line, I don't like the camera look. There was just no need for him to... And it's the way it plays out as well. He says it and then looks at the camera. Like, he didn't even look at the camera and say it. He just, like, was talking to himself, as Bond does, and then just looked at the camera like, Thank you, folks. So if they just had the line, I would have quite liked it. And again, I think that's quite fun and in line with Bond pointing the finger itself and a bit of humour. It worked for me, but yeah, don't look at the camera.
Never look at the camera. I knew this was coming, obviously, and I did. Yeah, I was curious. I too don't mind the line. I think some people will be completely against the idea of breaking the fourth wall. and I don't really care. But so I just seen it. I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. But it was only after like watching the rest of the film now and realizing how much they, as I said, how much they push the idea that this is the same character. And do you remember this from the previous films? That's all that sort of stuff. I think why bother with that? Like if you're so clearly trying to mesh together this series despite a new actor, why then clearly point it out? It just doesn't make sense to me. So the actual line is fine, but I think in the grand scheme of the film, I think it's just mixed messages. You're giving me mixed messages, film. Calm down.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and I think maybe it would have been better to just kind of avoid that issue and kind of leave it. But I don't know, I kind of appreciate that straight away. They're going to at least kind of reference it, even if it's maybe not done in the right way. And I think doing it in the opening sequence before the credits, it was probably the smart way to do it, right? Like, if there was any time in the film you were going to point it out, that is kind of when you would do it.
Yeah. Get over and done with quick.
Yeah, definitely. So then we transitioned to the credits, and there was no fancy transition or anything that I noticed. Like, they've put a real effort in the last few films to kind of have them tie together. You know, the main one I think of is obviously the Thunderball one, where the Aston Martin spits all that water steam out and then it goes into the Thunderball one. So they were clearly making an effort there, but this one didn't do that. And I think that kind of ties in with the rest of the credits, where, like, I don't think the credit sequence was bad, but this is like one of the most basic ones we've had so far. Like, it doesn't, it's just colors and a few silhouettes and some footage. And it seems interesting that they were clearly building these up and making them more complicated. But for this film, we have something that's only a little bit more complicated than Dr. No was.
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan. When it first started and you got sort of the... Is it the clock at the beginning and the sort of Britannia statue? And I was like, oh, right, I remember some of the sort of iconography from this now. This is going to be good. And then I completely forgot that it has that hourglass and, yeah, like the slideshow and clips from previous films. And then that just completely wrecked it for me. I really did not like that. Again, it's that thing of like, look, it's the same character. Look, these are all the people that he faced. Do you remember Pussy Galore and Goldfinger and all that? And I guess that wouldn't have been terrible, but I think just having it as this slideshow manner just looked really kind of amateur. I don't know. It was like such a lazy way of doing it to me.
Well, yeah, you could have been smarter with it, right? And it's kind of what you said with the other thing before, where like they'd focus on it for ages. Like,
yeah,
it's not just a few quick clips. Like, about half of it, maybe even more of this sequence is these clips of the older films. And it's like, yeah, I remember that. Yep, I do. Yep. Dr. No, that's the guy. I remember this. Like, it's fine. But if they just showed a few clips, or maybe some from, just a few clips would have been fine to tie it together. But they instead kind of strip this sequence of a lot of its identity for the sake of reminding you that they made 5 films before this.
Yeah, if I was to sum up, this title sequence with 2 words, it would be clips and nips. So many nipples, my goodness.
Oh, so you weren't paying attention to the circles and the producer credits, but you get some silhouette nips on there. Joe straight away writing that down.
You could have not missed them. So many nipples. So clips and nips. There you go.
Yeah, and also like the colors are not bad, but it's like it's blue for ages, and then it's green for ages, and then it's black for ages, and that's your lot. So even visually outside of the clips, I just don't think they really just attempt to do anything, which is just so bizarre. And maybe that has something to do with the budget, because this one has a lower budget than the other ones. So maybe that tied into it. But yeah, odd how basic this is. So I wanted to ask you, what did you think of this song? What do you think of the main theme of this film?
I think I like it. I really like it. I think like if you think of the actual reasons for why this was the case, where it was an instrumental. Again, it's that same Wikipedia. I mean, no, something else. But yeah, on Wikipedia it says like, how on earth could you get on Her Majesty's Secret Service into a lyric for a song? and that makes total sense. Right, just don't even try. So I think this being the next best thing is really good. I mean, it's a great secondary Bond track. Like if you don't want to use the Bond theme, you can use this, and it works just as well.
Yeah, I really like the song. And like you kind of say, like in terms of instrumentals for Bond, I don't always associate this song with this film.
No.
I just associate it as a great Bond track that is quite versatile and you can really tie to the series. The problem for me is that I would say this is an amazing track. It just doesn't work as a title theme. It just doesn't fit. It didn't really do anything for the visuals. I don't think it just doesn't work. There's just not enough like punch behind it is what I ended up writing down. There's no real, it doesn't need to be big. It can be slower and those themes kind of work, but it just kind of sits somewhere in the middle where it doesn't quite have the weight of a Thunderball or a Goldfinger, but then it's not quite as energetic as the From Russia with Love or Dr. No, and it doesn't have that like romantic angle that You Only Live Twice does. So again, amazing track. I just think it's kind of misused having it over these opening credits to kind of get you excited and into this Bond theme. It just doesn't serve that purpose for me.
So do you think using it as, for an action scene is where it's best?
Well, we'll get there.
Okay.
I think it works well as part of a film score. And again, it's a fantastic piece. It's just maybe doesn't quite... I feel like they thought it had a lot higher impact and a lot more excitement behind it with the way they've used it than it does.
Right. Sure. So after the credits, we cut to Bond properly, in full view. He's, as we say, we have to have the hotel scene. So we have the hotel scene. One thing I wrote down, first, like, as I say, first proper look at Bond now after the opening title sequence or pre-title sequence, is I put down that the suit he's wearing, it's like a cream-coloured suit, and it just stood out to me because I would have assumed they would have Bond in like the classic black tux or something like that, but no, it is in the cream suit, bit different.
Well, they had him in not the tux, but in a more black suit in the intro, didn't they?
Yeah, but he took off his jacket very, very early, so it's just him in like the frilly white shirt. So I thought they'd have him in the full, the full tux. But no, anyway, he's in a hotel. I don't know if it's ever explained why he's there.
Because he follows the woman there because she's parked up there, so he follows her to that hotel.
Wow, I did not even connect. See, I did not connect that bit together.
I didn't get the suicide attempt, but I got the why Bond was there.
Right. So yeah, I think he just all I wrote down for this bit is that he goes pretty much straight to the casino. I don't think anything interesting happens before then.
No, he goes straight to, he checks in this whitish kind of suit, and then they fade to night, and he's in a tux in the casino.
Oh, that's right. It does that weird reflection in the swimming pool about.
Yeah.
And look, he's in this casino, which I have to say, it's probably one of the ugliest casinos we've seen so far in the Bond series. It is so bad looking.
I didn't even notice, but I guess not enough smoke, I suppose, right?
Not
to
enough
hide
smoke.
it.
Too much like garish purple and blue on the walls. Oh my god, it just did not seem very classy. But straight to again. I had to look up the card game that is just constantly in these early Bond films. The Baccarat, or Flemin de Jeu, or Chemin de Fleur, I don't know what it's called. Whatever that one is.
Flip 2 cards, win a prize.
Yeah, something about the bonk, right? Straight onto the table
name's
playing
Bonk. James Bonk.
That's definitely not the right word, but you know what I mean. Straight onto that. The shoe. I think it's called the shoe, isn't it, that thing?
Joe, you keep digging. I'm just here.
I'm not a casino man. I'm sorry. But yeah, he's on there and he's playing that game, and suddenly, from behind a lampshade, it's the lady from the beach. She's there, looking lovely and all dolled up, and she takes part in the card game, and very quickly loses. She bets a lot of money, instantly loses, and is about to say to the croupier, like, I haven't got any money. Sorry. So Bond steps in and sort of covers for her. And I mean, we're going to be talking about that character a lot, which is obviously Tracy in the end. But I think as far as Bond girls go, like, great start. I really like this character, and I think this first introduction of her, and it's exactly the same as from the book, because again, this is one of the few books I have read. She just likes to mess around and get into trouble and doesn't really care, and you just see it straight away, and I thought that was quite good.
Yeah, it was definitely nice considering how this film plays out to get her up front. And she does disappear for a big chunk of the films, but straight away, like, you see Tracy before you see Bond properly.
Yeah.
And that was definitely the smart way to go about it. And as you say, you get a little bit of personality. I feel like Diana Rigg, is that her name, right?
Yeah.
I feel like her presence on screen is so striking, like, as an actress. Like, she really stands out, even, like, you know, she hasn't got much to do here, but she does really kind of sell that character. And just, it's one of those where sometimes with Bond girls, like, if they're not given much, they do just kind of disappear in the background. But this is someone where I would say she's not given a ton of stuff in some of these scenes in terms of dialogue and character development. Like, that it's there, yes, but not always. But even on those scenes, she just pops. Like, she's just very eye-catching, and probably like the best cast Bond girl, maybe ever in all the films.
I 100% agree. I think I mean, I'm going to get onto this later on, but she, to me, is probably, like, acting wise, the best in this film, and by far kind of upstages George Lazenby in all of the scenes they're in together in terms of acting credibility, and she's really good. And as you say, I think any other actress might not have been able to do that well with this character, but she really kind of makes her mark really quickly, and definitely like the most captivating Bond girl we've seen so far, straight from the get-go.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say she's my favorite, but again, in terms of acting chops and being iconic and just being so good on screen, I can't think of anyone that comes close. Sorry, Halle Berry. Sorry.
She'll get that Jinx spin-off one day.
She'll get hers. But I do also quickly, while we're here, now that we've seen Bond, because we've seen Bond in like 3 different outfits, you know, the black suit, and straight away he's in this white kind of, as you would say, kind of cream suit. I saw it more as being a little bit more grey. It's definitely a very odd colour, but
okay.
And we see him in the tux as well. So straight away they're trying to reinforce him as being a good dresser and having all this fancy stuff, and that's something that kind of recurs throughout the film. I would say George Lazenby as Bond is a lot more focused on being well dressed, really. How well dressed he is kind of depends on personal taste. But Goldfinger, I think, started off with Sean Connery in like shorts and an open shirt by the pool.
Yeah, there's little tiny blue shorts. Yeah.
Yeah, and that wasn't the only time he wore those shorts.
He loved those things.
Yeah, but in this film, he's very smartly, very like proper fancy clothes all the time. But something that stood out to me about him, and it started in this scene and it's kind of recurring throughout the film, so I probably won't bring it up again, but he's very thin. And I don't know if that's because Sean isn't thin. Sorry, Sean. But he really stood out to me as being a very tall, slender man. And I think that comes from his modeling, you know, the fact that he was a model. He wasn't an actor. And it was quite distracting to see someone who's meant to be James Bond, who's meant to get physical and things like that, be as skinny as he is. Again, it's not really fair on George Lazenby to, you know, not trying to body shame anywhere, but it was just like, it's so weird seeing Bond as a very tall, slender man. I just don't picture Bond that way.
Yeah. That didn't bother me too much, but that's usually because I was distracted by his acting rather than how he looked. As you say, he was a model. I think this was his first film since, like, having done modeling. And to me, and I'll say it now because otherwise I'll just keep harping on about it. But I don't think he's a very good actor. And you could be like, well, it's his first film, like, give him a break. But then, like, no. No, it's a Bond film. Like, they should have picked someone that was a good actor, and I think they didn't. They made a mistake. But most of the times he's in this film, I just can't I just don't like it. I just don't like it when he's trying to do like the romantic stuff with actually the stuff with Tracy ends up being the better parts, but everything else in this casino, talking to M, I just don't like it. I'm sorry, George. You're bad.
Oh, you went straight to the B word, straight to bad.
Bad
George
Bond. Bad Bond. Yeah, that's my main takeaway from this so far.
Okay, well, I think we'll discuss it a little bit more. We'll move things along because I don't fully agree, but there's plenty of opportunities to talk a little Lazenby in this film. So after that, basically Tracy walks away from the table and Bond follows her, and then they sit down and start having a chat. And I think basically not very much happens with this chat. It's just, I think they instantly already know each other's names. Like they just sit down. It's like, James Bond. Tracy. I don't know why that's the case.
Yeah, I don't know. This scene is so short. It's just like, yeah, goes, doesn't it?
Yeah. So Tracy's all like, haha, here's my key. And Bond's like, excellent. And then we quite quickly cut to Bond entering the hotel room for Tracy, where, oh no, there's a man in there, and he attacks Bond. And
oh no.
And we get a very similar scene to the one at the beach, where it's just Bond in a hotel room, and it's a lot of throwing people, a lot of throwing stuff and kind of hits, and it's like it's one of those where it's very fast, but it's all the impact, right? So instead of Bond kind of like going backwards, swinging forward and punching and then going back, instead you just get forward punch. You just get like the impact, and it ends up like these scenes just end up being like impact after impact after impact after impact. Oh, the henchman's down, and that's your lot.
Yeah, that is the issue with it. You're right. There's no follow through.
Yeah, so you don't really get that kind of satisfaction. And also something that I noticed here, which I don't think was in the beach scene, but we do get in later ones, the dubbing of the noises for the fighting are very off and very peculiar. You just get like, normally you just get those fights. So it's like, like you get noises like that. Yeah. But like actually what I just did, not like I'm doing a bad job imitating it. No, like actually those type of noises.
Yes,
like it's extremely amateur for some reason.
I put down lots of grunting. And kind of linked to that, I put weak sound effects. Now, this may have been something with the previous Bond films. Could well have been like they're just using the same sound effects. But I didn't really notice it as much back then. With this film and other parts of this film, the sort of like the punch sound was so bad. It was like cartoony bad. Yeah. I may have just been sort of overly fixating on it, and it's actually not a big deal. But that was my main takeaway from this little fight scene is, lots of grunting, bad sound effects, and again, like sloppy cutting, editing. So not good.
Yeah, again, unfortunately, just not good. I mean, I don't think it really affects the film too much for me. It was just very odd because they didn't have these problems with the other ones. Like you say, I didn't notice any problems with the sound edit. Well, there were problems with the sound editing, but with the fight scenes, they stripped out the music and just had two people fighting, and it kind of worked and was fine and wasn't. It worked. So this again just sounds so amateur. Like someone just randomly added a load of just like they were like, oh, I need to edit this scene. I need it done by tomorrow morning. All right, I'll get a mic. Get off. And then I'll just put it there. There we go, done. Peter won't notice. And then he didn't.
No, he didn't. It was cashed his check and he left.
He was already out the door and with George Lazenby.
Arm in arm. Actually, I think they hated each other by all accounts. But anyway, one other thing about this fight, because it's a recurring thing, so I'm going to say it now so I don't have to keep saying it, is Lazenby, well, it's twofold. One, bad writing, and two, Lazenby can't deliver them. But so many like end of fight, end of scene quips in this, and they're all bad. I don't think there was one good, shocking, positively shocking type line. I did not count one.
I mean, they made sense, so they have that going for them.
Half a point.
Half a point for making sense. But yeah, again, I appreciate that they were in there. But yeah, you're right. George Lazenby cannot deliver those lines in that cocky way that Sean Connery did.
No, doesn't have the chops for it.
So then this scene ends, and I have to mention it, where the man gets knocked down, but for some reason, like a bloody Tom and Jerry cartoon, he doesn't just collapse. He goes to the ground, he leans back up, rolls his eyes, and then falls down again.
Yeah, you half expected the birds flying around his head.
Cuckoo, cuckoo.
Yeah, strange choice.
But you don't get anything like that ever again in the film. This is the only time that happens.
Is it bad that I'm not even sure who that character was?
It was just the henchman of Draco.
Right, okay. That does make sense. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because he does come back. He's in the car.
Mm-hmm.
So after that, he goes back to the hotel room. We get a nice view of his Freddy shirt. And I think I need to talk about the Freddy shirt for a second, okay? Because this goes back to, did they want to separate George Lazenby out as a very separate Bond doing his own thing? Or did they want to tie it more as just a straight up replacement for Sean Connery?
Exactly.
Because the Freddy shirt is so, like, it just, you can't see anything else when it's on screen. And it's so different to anything else that Sean Connery wore that it kind of like makes me think, okay, they do want to do something different with this Bond. But no, that's not really true.
Yeah, you're right. Maybe it was like George's favorite shirt from his modeling days. It's like, in my contract, I have to wear this shirt.
I already got the shirt, guys, so
save me some money.
So I don't mind them changing the dress sense a bit. You know, again, I like a lot of the outfits that he wears throughout the film. Just for some reason, they specifically took that iconic Bond look and that iconic Bond tuxedo and kept it mostly the same. They just gave him a very distinct Freddy shirt. And it's like, again, if you were going for a very different type of Bond, I can kind of get down with the Freddy shirt. But I don't think that's what they wanted.
Yeah, well, it's like when they change Bond actors later on and they change from cigarettes to cigars and martinis to whiskey or whatever. Like that, it's clear then they're trying to make the new actor their own Bond. Whereas here, you're right, it's sort of a strange middle ground and it's getting a little bit of both and not working for either.
So then Bond's in the hotel room and it turns out Tracy is in there, not wearing too much. Again, a classic Bond setup. But because Bond has been attacked, he's very suspicious of her and basically accuses her of, like, why was there a man in the room? And grabs her arm, gives her a little shake, gives her the slap, which is iconic in its own way.
That's him. That's him based. I think he even says like he based a lot of his acting on Sean. That's the Sean coming through there, unfortunately.
Yeah, he's just not that type of Bond, is he? He's not that aggressive, kind of gruff sort of person. He's a little bit more, or Gentle George, we'll call him. Why not?
Oh,
yeah, that's nice, right?
Yeah.
And then basically she's like, no, I didn't send the guys, and I'm also not a liar. So then Bond says to get dressed, which I put like 3 question marks at the end because I was like, that doesn't... Is that how this goes in Bond films?
Well, it didn't, so I don't quite... Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's very odd. And then the man from before who was knocked out is now suddenly outside the door, listening in, and... Then we get back to those guys, Tracy and Bond talking, and she says that she's here for a business transaction, and they lie together. Eventually, he goes in for a kiss. She's like, no way, Jose. But then is also like, I always pay my debts, and you just paid me a load of money to get me out of there. So I guess, sure, why not? And they do end up sleeping together.
Yeah. And I really like Tracy in this scene because she... It's just total sort of you're getting a really good idea of her emotional state of just complete apathy, like she's just selling her body effectively by having Bond covered her in the casino game, and you just get that complete sort of ignorance and emptiness in her. I think that's great. I don't think it works on Bond bouncing off of that, but as far as like the scene goes, I think it was a good scene.
Yeah, from what I'm describing, or what I just described there, it doesn't sound great. And I think that goes for a lot of their relationship in this film, where if you read the script, if you read this on paper, you would say, like, this is terrible. Like, can we do a rewrite here to make this make a little bit more sense? Can we have a little bit more dialogue? Can we have like a little bit more reason to it? But just like, because Diana Rigg just sells it, like, it's fine. Like, it actually doesn't become that big of a deal. And there'll probably be some stuff later on we complain about with this film and their relationship. But again, in all these scenes, she just sells it. So you just buy it. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, it actually works because of her.
Yeah. So yeah, next morning, Bond wakes up. Tracy's gone, obviously, and I think his gun. He looks in the drawer where he stored his gun, which the gun's missing now. But there is some money, so which I thought was kind of strange, like some casino chips, of the amount that he bailed her out of. So I'm guessing the idea behind that is that. Well, I don't really know why that is the case.
Yeah, I don't know either. The only thing I can think of is that because that's Draco's men chasing after Bond, and she would know them, that they bailed her out.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But they don't say, so that's just a guess.
But yeah, straight afterwards, Bond is about to leave the hotel, checks out, is wearing a lovely orange turtleneck. I was gonna ask you, because you said earlier about you like a lot of the things that he wears. Is this one of them?
I would say so, yeah. I mean, I'm not prepared to rank Lazenby's dress sense in this one and all the different suits, but there's not many I didn't like.
Okay, fair enough. I thought it was quite, I don't know, I was just getting a bit Velma vibes, that's all.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
Of course, sorry. So yeah, he's just about to leave the hotel, and then he immediately gets sort of, he gets kidnapped by this guy that's kind of got a gun pointed towards him, and he's taken into a car, driven off. And again, constant jovial quips from Bond as he's being kidnapped, which don't work at all. Because Bond's just there smiling away, trying to have that sort of coy Sean element to him, and doesn't work. But very quickly we get to where they're dropping him off, taking him out of the car. And this might be my favourite part of the film, and I think you know why.
Oh.
Can you work it out?
Is it the little man?
Yes. Yes, the little whistling midget. Oh, what a choice! What an artistic choice for this film.
Are you going to explain yourself?
No, we're going to move straight on. No, they walk through sort of like this factory, and as they walk through, the henchman and Bond, there's this little small person. Midget? I think midget is actually fine to say. I don't think they like dwarf.
Well, it depends if they have dwarfism, right? Like, dwarfism is a real thing. So if someone is actually got dwarfism, I think that's fine. I'm not too sure.
Okay, well, it was someone like that who's a janitor, clearly, who's sweeping up, and that in itself is like, okay, that's a interesting choice to like really focus on that, because like the camera does linger on this person sweeping, but they're lingering on him because he's whistling Goldfinger. So he's whistling the Goldfinger tune. Why?
So I have to hold my hands up here. I didn't notice he was whistling Goldfinger.
Oh,
I was just
whistling
like,
Goldfinger.
Yeah, I read about it afterwards, but during the film, I was just like, what? That's a casting choice. I mean, that's awesome. But like, they don't explain this. It's literally someone who's, like 3 feet tall with a broom, brooming an abandoned factory. I think. Well, it's not really abandoned, we find out, but still. And I think I was just too distracted by that. I didn't put together it was Goldfinger.
Yeah, strange choice. Another sort of wink at the audience type thing, which worked, as you say. I think you can get away with that in the pre-title sequence. I think we're now into the film. Like, you can't do that anymore. That did not work.
But it's your favourite part of the film.
It's my favourite part, but it didn't work.
Yeah, I think I didn't notice the majority of these references, and I think I had a better time for it. Like, maybe there's other ones I did pick up on, but the main one was the rifle at the start in the car, but I couldn't really think of any other ones. And I think, again, this film is better when you don't see all that stuff that connected to the other one, and you can treat it as this unique standalone Bond film. It just works a lot better in that context.
Yeah, I would agree.
So after going past the little person with the broom, then Bond, there's an elevator, they open it up and Bond sees his time to attack. And we have another action scene, which is very similar to the other ones. Although this one has a lot of weird zoom-ins. And this is another editing trick that they seem to love in this film. You get a lot of those quick edits and just the impact edits. But also you just get all these zoom-ins, these quick zoom into certain bits. And it's like, that just doesn't work for me either. I think I prefer the quick edits to the zoom-ins. So we have Bond fighting three people and he beats them all up. Again, it's just all these zoom-ins on all this stuff happening. And it just doesn't look good for me.
They just keep throwing things and seeing what sticks, and none of it does.
No, but they do the zoom-ins again, but it's... Yeah, again, I don't think it bothers me too much, but I don't think there's any fist fights in this film that work. Like, you just have to kind of take that as a big L for this film. It's like they tried, and they're not the worst. Like, there's been worse. I think Thunderball had some worse ones, but there's none of them really work in the same way that, like, From Russia with Love and You Only Live Twice did.
Yeah.
So after that, Bond then basically goes through the... No, is it actually an elevator, or is it just a...
It's just a door.
Oh, it's just a door. I thought it was an elevator.
I think it's just a door.
Yeah, okay, I think you're right. Yeah, security door. He fights his way through, and I do like how this ends. So basically, because he was in a big fight, he has a knife, and he switches over or goes through the door, and then he's crouching and holding this knife. But he's found himself in a very fancy, very nice-looking room with what looks like a very well-off businessman. And I actually did like that pose, even though the fight wasn't too great. It was cool to see Bond holding a knife like this in that like combat kind of ready pose. I think it was a smart way of transitioning that across.
Yeah, it's quite an iconic bit of the film, like that pose. I see that quite a lot, that shot. Kind of reminds me of one that we get later on in the film, but I'll try and remember to point it out.
Yeah, so then the businessman is like, I'm Draco. Yeah, it's Draco, right? Not Draco.
Yeah, because Draco makes me think of Draco Malfoy, and I definitely would have wrote that down.
Yeah, Draco. Yeah, I think I wrote Draco, but I think it's Draco. So this is going to be fun.
We're going to switch between that the whole podcast.
Oh, definitely.
For sure.
So yeah, he introduced himself. He's the head of a major European crime organization. I didn't quite get the name, but I don't think it's really important. He's just a very powerful man in the underworld, basically. And then Bond reacts by throwing his knife, but he doesn't throw it at the guy. He instead throws it at the calendar and hits, I think, the 14th of September, where Draco's all like, Mr. Bond, it's the 13th. And Bond says, I'm superstitious, so I didn't want to throw it at the 13th. I didn't get that line, but...
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say this is the one. This is like a quip that you did like.
It's fine. I didn't really dislike... I don't dislike a ton of the quips, really, but a lot of them are just fine. I just didn't get it, really.
I guess he doesn't like the number 13.
Well, I think the filmmaking purpose for that is because you're not going to know the date. Like, they're not going to, and they can't awkwardly show you what the date is. Like, they can't, like, show the knife landing there and then just quick, zoom in on a calendar nearby and be like, there you go, they match. So I think instead they intentionally had Bond hit the wrong one, so Draco would point out that it's the wrong one, but they needed to give Bond a reason for hitting the wrong one. So this was like kind of their way of doing that.
But then, was there a big emphasis on, was there a time element to this film?
No,
we need to know
not
it was
really.
the 13th?
I mean, it's Christmas later.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
So maybe that does help, actually, because it's Christmas, right? Because, like, that means that this film took place from September to December, and that does give some sort of time frame in terms of Bond and Tracy being together.
Yeah, that's the only useful thing I could see getting out of that, is because it does end up being a montage, so you need some sort of indication of actually how much time they spent together. Yeah.
Yeah, so after introducing himself, Draco and Bond then sit down. Draco is the one that then says the line, get him a drink, shaken, not stirred. He doesn't have Bond say it, which I think was probably smart at this point. Like,
George
even
would
in
have
the
messed
Sean
it up.
Yeah, well, that's mean. But even in the Sean Connery films, they kind of stopped him saying it. Like most of these Sean Connery ones, I can't think of all of them on the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure it's a line that other people say to Bond, not to Bond to other people at this stage.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And they basically sit down and have a talk. I don't have many details in terms of what they talk about because this scene was quite rambly to me.
Yeah.
Like there's this whole big monologue or this big speech or that Draco goes into about Tracy and her mother and him and stuff, and I just completely switched off. I was just like, I don't know what you're saying, and I'm just gonna have a little drinksy poos and catch up on my notes here. Like, it doesn't help that he has quite a thick accent as well. Like I could understand him in the rest of the film, but when he's talking quite like slowly and remorsefully, it's just like I just can't really understand you, mate. That's fine. You're Tracy's dad. We got it. Makes sense to me. Cool. All right. I'll let you finish. I'll join you again when you're done.
You're going to get to your raspberry ripple ice cream.
Oh, I didn't have ice cream.
Sadly. Oh, no. Yes, you're right. It's a very big kind of exposition dump of information with this scene between Bond and Draco. I will say I kind of switched off again a little bit, only because I kind of knew what was coming up, so I didn't need to pay attention. I imagine if this was your first time watching it, you would be like, "What? What's going on? Who are you?" sort of thing. But it's okay. I just put it sort of works the scene, but only because whoever dubbed Draco, because he was dubbed.
What?
Yeah, I know. Amazing. Had a very nice voice. I liked his voice. It's a very smooth voice, very easy to listen to. But I agree. Yeah, it was basically the main point you want to get from this scene, which is really, yeah, as you say, just two people sitting next to a fireplace. Is Draco is Tracy's dad. Tracy's not doing too well. She's emotionally unstable. She needs a man in her life. She needs Bond. Bond obviously doesn't really want to settle down with a woman, so he kind of uses this as a bargaining chip to get some information on Blofeld, because Draco, given he is in like a crime syndicate, probably has some information about Blofeld. So that's what really this all amounts to. Is Bond agrees, but only because he wants to get some info from Draco.
Yeah, so Draco initially offers £1 million pounds or euros or whatever it was. Don't think the euro existed back then, but yeah, at like £1 million to marry, of which he says no. And I thought it was quite interesting about this film is that this is the first time we really get a proper like plot going, and I didn't dislike that approach. But compared to, say, like You Only Live Twice and Thunderball, where they have this big plot that starts kind of straight away, and you kind of get, and even Goldfinger as well, you get this big kind of setup, and there's a lot of time setting this stuff up, so you get like, okay, Bond's doing this, and these are the stakes and things like that. This film is like the opposite, and I might be making this comparison to, again, later in the film as well as we get into it, but this feels more like Dr. No in terms of a lot of its plot pacing, where it's a lot more kind of basic and stripped back, because if we want to summarize what's happened so far, I don't know how far into the film we are, maybe like half an hour or something, maybe that's a bit generous, but Bond found a woman on the beach who was suicidal and it's just kind of hung out and followed her around, and it turns out she's just part of a daughter of a very powerful man, and now Bond's like, okay, I can use this to get close to Spectre, but this is the first time we've heard about Spectre. This is the first time we've kind of heard about Blofeld and him wanting to know about Blofeld. And again, there's no real stakes here or anything like that. It's a very more slower paced, lower key film, which, considering the trajectory of what we were getting with Thunderball and You Only Live Twice, it's a very big change, very drastic kind of a approach to doing this.
Yeah, and it's sort of ping-ponging in terms of, if we look at You Only Live Twice, where we know what's happening. I think we discussed this in the previous podcast about how in that film we're seeing Bond. We know what's happening. We know the plot before Bond does, so we're seeing Bond learn. Back to this one, it's as more like Dr. No, as you say, where we are with Bond every step of the way, finding out more about eventually like the clinic and all that sort of stuff. So, it's good that it keeps changing like that, because I think if it was to stay on one way of telling a story like that for too long, it might get a little bit repetitive.
Yeah, totally. And I think after Thunderball and You Only Live Twice, a back to basics Bond story that still carries on the story overall was probably the smart way to go, especially with a new Bond coming in. So I actually really liked the pacing of this film, even though this is the longest film by far. This is an hour and 42 minutes. No, not sorry, 142 minutes long. So this is the longest one by far, and I think the third longest Bond film overall. And some of it is, that happened because of this kind of pacing where things just move and doesn't have this big things and it doesn't go that quickly.
Yeah, and a lot of snow later on.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of scenes with snow in.
Yeah, just a few.
Yeah.
So yeah, as I say, that scene ends with Bond agreeing, but only under the condition of getting more Spectre info. And I don't really think much else happens. Really, we just cut then straight to back to London. Back to the Moneypenny scene. Back to, I'm sure you're very happy to see, the hat throwing.
Oh, it was fantastic, right? Fantastic.
Come on,
scene.
give me the review of the hat throw.
It was fantastic. So basically, he did what Sean kind of couldn't. He just walked into the room, instant throw of the hat, one nice smooth motion, lands on perfectly. There's a lot of things you can say about Sean Connery and George Lazenby, but George Lazenby can toss a hat, let me tell you. And I was very impressed. He sold me at that moment. I was like, give him the contract, get him along. Because there was no cuts, there was no editing. It was just one walk in, throw the hat, done. Very impressed.
He did have the contract for 7 films, but
Well.
but yeah, I agree. I put very nonchalant, just does it, which I think helps. Definitely helps with the hat throw. But yeah, he walks in and we have the little Bond and Moneypenny scene, which to me was not really anything standout. I think, again, this is where I'm seeing Lazenby not being a great actor. But one thing I did like is that Moneypenny has great hair. I loved her hair in this. I know that we're not really meant to be focusing too much on stuff like that, but great hair.
No, you see what you want to see, Joe. That's what we're here.
Oh, you're going to regret that.
Oh, no.
Especially with the next film coming out. Oh, yes.
Well, I wish you the best with that one.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's weird how they just straight away try and have George Lazenby and I can't remember the actress's name, unfortunately, but Moneypenny have that exact same relationship. Like, it's very much supposed to be exactly the same. They don't make any changes with this one. And this probably would have been one where maybe tweaking a bit would have helped, because I just didn't get any chemistry from these two. And no. I'm not as negative about George Lazenby and his acting as you are. I'll be honest. I haven't vocalized that because I'm too scared. But I'm not as down on his portrayal here. But I will admit, when he tries to one-to-one do the stuff Sean did with the other actors, it just doesn't work. And this didn't annoy me or anything, but yeah, George Lazenby or James Bond being played by George Lazenby does not have that chemistry at all with Moneypenny.
Well, that's the thing is, when we were watching the Connery films, the acting wasn't standing out to me of these sort of scenes with Moneypenny or whoever it may be. But now that we haven't got Sean and we're getting someone else, now it's really stood out. All the stark contrast in acting capabilities, and I don't want to bash. It wasn't terrible, right? I think that is it. It's just I'm fresh out of seeing Sean. This is quite eye-opening, but I mean it's not enough to completely wreck the film. So I'm not going to be mean for much longer. But yeah, it's just that's the thing that really stood out.
And a lot of this stuff stands out at the beginning, right? Which is why we're talking about it. Once things get going, you don't really think about it too much. It's just like, yeah, that's James Bond, George Lazenby, that's fine. It's just these are the opening moments where you kind of, it stands out the most because it's like, oh, this is not Sean Connery, this is someone else, and they only did it once. So it's a lot more at the front of your mind early on.
Yeah.
And the rest of the scene is quite quick. It's basically Bond goes in to see M, and M says, we're taking you off the operation, which, do you remember the name of the operation?
Yeah, I wrote it down because I don't recall hearing it before. I guess it's because it would have been a new operation after the last film, but Operation Bedlam.
Bedlam.
Yeah, Bedlam.
Okay, so yeah, he's taking him off that, and I think Operation Bedlam was very specifically to find Blofeld and stop Spectre, right? Like, And they don't specifically say this, but I take this as in it's been 2 years since You Only Live Twice. So they were like, we know Blofeld got away, so he needs to be stopped. So, but he does say specifically it's been 2 years that you've been on the operation.
Yeah.
Which I really appreciated, that little bit of continuity. Even if some of the continuity in this film doesn't make sense, I do appreciate that at the very least.
Yeah, and then you need that, otherwise you don't really. The reaction of Bond doesn't really make sense. So you need to know that this was his driving factor, taking like consuming his life sort of thing. But yeah, I think that's kind of it, right? So because M is very dismissive, he's just like, yep, nope, that's it, off you go. So Bond leaves M's office and straight away to Moneypenny. Take a note, Moneypenny, and he basically quits MI6, quits being a spy, and is done with it. He goes off to his office and starts packing up straight away. It's like ludicrously fast.
The thing that stood out to me was like, he had an office? Like, we've never seen his office before. And then he's just in there get a big cardboard box, putting his plant in there, his mug, his favourite pencil. And I'm just like, what room is this?
It's not a very nice office, really.
No, it's really dingy.
Thought it'd be nicer. But this is another part of the film which is very on the nose with the previous references to past Bond films, where he's taken out all of the gadgets and things that he's used. You know, he takes out the I think it's Honey Rider's knife sort of thing that she was wearing on the beach, and as all this is happening on screen, you're getting a little bit of the cues from the themes of those films. So you're getting a little bit of Underneath the Mango Tree, and then he pulls out the wristwatch from Rush of Love with the wire on it. I can't remember what they're called. And then the rebreather from Thunderball, and it's just bad. I hate this bit. Like this little slideshow. And hey, do you remember these gadgets, everyone? Here's the music as well, in case you forgot.
I'll be honest, I didn't really connect that too much. Like, I wasn't seeing this as him going through all his old films and stuff. I don't know what I was doing. I don't know. Okay. I was just looking elsewhere, but I didn't really. I mean, I think I noticed they were from previous films, but I didn't really connect that or think about it too much. It was just him with his stuff. Just, there's a load of gadgets. Cool.
Yeah, I think having the gadgets is fine. I just think the music was just too much. It's like, just give the audience some credit that they can recall. Like, if they're seeing this film, they're probably a fan of Bond films, so like, they would hopefully remember some things. And it's like, no, we need to have the music really awkwardly fade from one into the other to accompany this, and I just didn't like it.
Do you think if this was still Sean Connery, you would have liked it better?
Oh, and Sean was quitting and was having all the gadgets being shown. Well, no, I don't think I would have. I think it's purely the actual editing of it and having the music I really don't like. Okay,
fair enough. I can agree with that. But again, I don't recall the music cues.
Are you sure you didn't have any ice cream?
Oh, I might have done. Maybe it was so much ice cream I've just blacked out. Don't remember it. But something I do remember is very shortly afterwards is that Bond, after packing his office up, is he gets a little whiskey flask out. He unscrews it. He has a little sip. And we get a shot of him sitting in his chair being reflected on a picture of the Queen.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, sorry, Mum, has a sip and toasts off the Queen. Because part of his resignation is that he specifically says, I'm resigning from Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I feel about this one. I always kind of do like the ties to Bond and actual British culture and society. And there was that whole thing with Daniel Craig and the Queen, and I thought that was really cool. So this one I thought was actually quite nice, even if it's maybe a little bit too much. I don't know. I'm quite conflicted about this.
Yeah, I didn't mind that, to be honest. I remember seeing it quite a lot on Twitter and that when the Queen died last year. All the Bond Twitter's accounts I follow it was all that same image.
Oh, I didn't see that. I thought it was more the Daniel Craig stuff is what I mostly saw.
Oh yeah, that too would have made sense.
So then after that, Bond is then called back to M. M says, I accept your request because Moneypenny submitted the request for Bond to resign. but he doesn't say anything else, which seems a bit cold. But then we find out that Moneypenny has changed it, so it's 2 weeks of leave rather than actually resigning.
Good old Moneypenny, eh?
Yeah. And then Bond just kisses her on the lips as a little thank you. So I was like, it's like, again, if that was Sean Connery, where they'd known each other for like 5 different films, fine. But seeing George Lazenby kiss Moneypenny on the lips, I'm just like, do you know her that well, bro? Is this
Sorry, I was just still paying attention to her hair.
She really popped.
She really did. Now, a question about this scene. So, yeah. Bond gives her a smooch, off he goes. And then just before the scene ends, you get this tiny little bit with M over the intercom saying... I can't remember what it says now, but like a little line to Moneypenny.
It was like, what would I do without you, Moneypenny? Which I think Bond also says to her.
Oh, because he's listening in. Right, that makes sense. But, so, she didn't actually swap. But M knew that he actually wanted to leave, right?
Yeah, I take it, and again, they don't tell you, but that Moneypenny spoke to M about it, and then between the two, they decided, okay, let's just change it to 2 weeks. And what maybe Moneypenny suggested that to M instead, and M agreed, which is why M says, you know, what would I do without you, Moneypenny? I take it as that. It's not just a pure Moneypenny change it, sends it to M. It's they have a conversation, make that decision together, and then they're both in on it when Bond gets the 2 weeks instead.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I feel like they could have maybe done a bit more of that. With M... With M knowing that this was something Bond was willing to resign over. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking that, but I just feel like there could have been something there.
Yeah, I think it was solid enough, but there's a lot of stuff that happens in this film, so
yeah, that's
kind
true.
of, yeah, we kind of get that M Moneypenny scene. It plays out quite well. I do quite like it. Then we kind of move on to the actual mission itself. But even then, there's no stakes here. It's just Bond gets 2 weeks off because to go and marry Tracy to then find Blofeld. We don't get that same mission briefing as we normally did.
Yeah. So Bond off on his 2 weeks leave. He goes to... I have no clue where he goes to.
I agree. I was so confused. They normally really set up the country that Bond goes to. Welcome to Jamaica, Bond, or you're going to Turkey and Istanbul and things like that. But I guess Spain, because it's the bullfighting stuff.
Yeah, so he goes to visit a bullfighting ring, where Draco is, and Tracy too, and yeah, you're right. Actually, yeah, I would have thought doesn't matter. You know what? Doesn't matter. This film's too long.
I have looked this up. It's Portugal, apparently.
Portugal. Oh, okay.
Which makes sense. Again, it's right there next to Spain. But I guess Spain because they just don't say.
So, yeah, he ends up here talking to Draco a little bit more about their deal with him courting Tracy and getting some info on Blofeld. Now, I got to say, like, this whole scene, I really can't remember too much from it apart from that. Like, they're all sitting down at a table. Tracy, because of I assume it's Draco's mistress or whoever that other lady was.
The one who can't act. I know the one.
She talks to Tracy and basically, I think, blabs about her dad's plan to find her a man. So she brings it up at the table where they're all together and gets angry and wants this all over and done with, and says to Draco, you know, just tell Bond what you know. Like, I don't want to do that. Just get this deal over and done with. So he does. He tells Bond about this lawyer. I wrote down his name because otherwise I would have forgot. It's called Gumbald. Great name. In Bern. So that's kind of all that he knows is a connection to Spectre and Blofeld. And Tracy's wandered off. But yeah, like the whole scene with them together, there's a bit of dialogue, but I could not tell you if there's anything interesting in that apart from just more plot stuff.
I don't know either. So again, it's a very... Well, I would say it's a simple scene, but it's not really. But the thing that I don't quite get, and it's something that this film doesn't really kind of bother with, it's the thing that I had about Goldfinger in Switzerland, where like they go to Switzerland, and sure, they're there, but Bond films up to this point has always been about kind of showing off the culture and Bond kind of being there and somewhat experiencing that. And that's always been something I've always liked about the films. And this one feels like it's trying to do that with the bullfighting, but it feels so secondary. And then again, they're just in Portugal, not that you would know that. And they don't spend much time in there, and they're saying the lawyer's in Switzerland, so then they bugger off to Switzerland. So I think this might be the first film in the series where we get the whole whirlwind tour across the countries where there's just no real impact between them. Like Goldfinger did that a little bit, but even then it was still like, okay, America and Switzerland, like there were still two very distinct places, and you did get somewhat of a sense, even if it was a bit diluted with Switzerland. But this is the first one where like, yeah, he's like by that beach and in that hotel with Tracy, wherever that is, and then his boom is in London, and then boom is in Portugal, again, not that you would know, and then boom is in Switzerland. And I think this is the film that establishes that type of trope for the franchise.
Yeah, but it's weird because then it does all that, and then it's like, boom, we're in the Alps, and we stay there for so long.
Yeah.
Like, so
long. It takes a while to get there, but once we're there, we're staying.
Yeah. Because that is the one thing I do like that we get onto later on, is like the location of the snow and the mountains. So that I like, but you're right, this first bit of the film, it's just all over the place.
Yeah, like if this was from Russia with Love, this scene would have been more focused on with the bullfighting and stuff. And not that I'm okay with bullfighting, but it would have showed it off as a little bit more. And then we would have spent more time in Portugal and seeing other parts of the country. But no, this is just a random country showing off a very small part of its culture and then buggering off, and we never come back here. And it's just odd. And again, it introduces that trope that we see in a lot of later Bond films. It kind of opens the door for them to have Bond somewhere randomly in the world just because it's Bond and he travels the world.
Yeah. There is one thing. So at the end of this scene where Tracy storms off, Bond goes and finds her, and she's crying, and he sort of consoles her. And this is where we get the beginning of their relationship actually growing. Partly because I guess Bond is trying to maybe still fulfill his part of the deal, but also because he's genuinely does actually start to develop feelings for her, because she is this, I think because of the nature of what we've said before, this character that doesn't really have any inhibitions, and she's quite self motivated and all that sort of thing. So he sees that as a bit different than all the other Bond girls in the past, sort of thing. And then this is where we get the montage of them dating and all the lovely things they do. So I guess this would have been sort of like, this should be where you see more of the country and all that sort of stuff, and the culture, but it's condensed into a very short montage of them bonding, but yeah, getting to know each other, and where we get the song. We have All the Time in the World. So finally gets played.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's weird seeing this type of montage in a Bond film. Let's just get that out of the way. Like, this is not something you would normally see, which does help it in a way, and because it does make it feel a little bit more distinct. But I never got the impression that Bond was actually properly falling for her throughout or any of this, really, because it is just those two hanging out. And then there's a line that happens after the fact, after the montage, where she says, I'm in love with him, which you're supposed to kind of have happen with the montage, but also because of the night they spent together in the hotel, because the reason why Tracy runs off and Bond follows and she's crying is because I think she's upset that she did genuinely like Bond and wanted to be with Bond, and was upset that Bond had taken a deal with her dad to marry her, basically. I think that's what that was supposed to be. But then they do end up spending time together. But yeah, again, she comments that, like, I don't think Bond's in love with me, but I'm in love. No, I'm in love with Bond. So I was a little bit confused by it, but it's fine. You know what this is about is a montage. They go to the city and do a bit of shopping. They ride horses. They go to like this rich, like this garden, and very fancy looking garden and things like that. And this might be part of the reason why Bond is so well dressed in this film, to try and match up with Tracy, because Tracy is very wealthy and likes all the fancier things going by this montage. So having George Lazenby Bond be someone who kind of visually fits in with that type of lifestyle, it just kind of helps sell it a little bit more that these two are actually quite a match, because they're both quite wealthy and both like those finer things.
I mean, she's a countess. He's got to meet her level.
And then also there's a load of bears in a concrete pit, which made me sad, but okay.
Oh, don't remind me of that.
They look like baby bears as well. I don't know if that was the angle, but like a load of bear cubs in a zoo pit. It's like, didn't
Was that in London, that bit?
It might be. It jumps
around
London
Zoo?
a lot.
I don't know. I just felt like that bit. Oh, no, maybe that bit was in... Oh, who knows?
That might be in Switzerland, because it transitions to Switzerland, right?
That would make more sense.
But you don't really get a sense of what Bond is thinking about all this as well. I think that's one thing, is that you know what Tracy is thinking. You know what she's about. She reacts to things and she talks about it. Bond never talks about Tracy in this part of the film, apart from he just doesn't talk about her. So it might have been nice to have some sort of line to hint at him and his feelings, but you only see this from one side, and Bond just feels a little bit of a blank slate at this point.
I think, yeah. In the grand scheme of the film, what later happens when we see the other women in this film and what Bond ends up doing, maybe that makes more sense that at this part of the film, he's still kind of just in it for the info and doesn't really care. But then having seen Ruby, whoever it is we see later on, and maybe that's what makes him realize that, actually, Tracy's not so bad. I don't know, because they're very different.
So bad.
They're very different women. Let's just say that.
Yeah, it's a little bit clumsy. I guess you could argue both ways, right? Does Bond fall in love with Tracy here, or is it later in the film? I took it as later in the film, and this was still just Bond being Bond, just seducing a woman. Maybe there's some interest there, but I don't think they put enough evidence down for me to kind of buy it so early on. But I do buy it later on, kind of. But I think it's supposed to be once they meet up again later. That's when I think that kind of they reconnect, and then that's when Bond kind of goes all in.
Right.
But again, you could see it both ways. Like, you could totally argue the whole point of this montage is for Bond to be falling in love as well. You could argue with that, certainly.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember now with the book, which is obviously going to have more chance to set up this relationship. At what kind of stage you get those thoughts of Bond, and I think it is earlier on, because you do get more of the beginning film with her trying to kill herself. So yeah, I guess it's one of those things. We've said this a couple of times, but you lose a certain element when you are translating books into film, and this one in particular, which is probably the most faithful to the book. So some things are of course going to be stripped back.
Yeah, and I think the faithfulness to the book explains the pacing that I was talking about earlier, where it doesn't feel the need to kind of go big and set up all the stakes. This feels very, again, similar to Dr. No, almost like it feels paced like the book, where it's just Bond is in this situation and that slowly develops over time, rather than it quickly develops to set up the film so you understand what's going on, and then that kind of pays off as you go. It doesn't quite have that same feel.
Yeah.
So then eventually, this montage leads to Switzerland, where Bond and Tracy are now all over each other, where you get a funny scene where they're in a car and the dad, or Draco's in the middle, or Draco's in the middle, sorry. And Bond and Tracy are like crushing him in the car. It's quite funny. But basically they drop Bond off at the lawyer's office. They're just like, now we're in Switzerland and the lawyer is in there. And something I noticed here, and it's in the rest of the film as well, we don't get a ton of like those wide shots establishing stuff. We do once we're fully in the Alps, but it's something that I really, really liked about You Only Live Twice, and it's kind of disappointing that I don't think we kind of get them in the same way here. And I would have really appreciated it, even just going to the lawyer's office, if we got those big, nice, wide, gorgeous looking shots kind of showing off the city and the location. And I think that like Portugal could have done with it as well. Just give me some nice, amazing looking shots really showing off where we are.
Yeah, especially as you say, they've done it before now. Like, they did it really well in the previous film, so why have they dropped that? It's a shame.
Yeah, they just take it all out, and you lose your sense of place a little bit. Like, there's establishing shots, they're just not as good or as eye-catching as the last few films.
No.
So, yeah, Bond then breaks into the lawyer's office. He has a little look around the office, trying to find some info. He then steps onto the balcony where we see this blonde construction guy down below, and then a crane comes over, and I don't know what you would call the thing that the crane has attached to it, but they basically drop off this big briefcase for Bond, which he takes it out, and it turns out it's a safe cracker, which was quite interesting to see because the last film had a way of Bond cracking a safe, and it was tiny that he could carry on him. And now this time they need a construction crane to lift this massive crap buster. Like, it's odd.
Well, it wasn't just a safe cracker. It was a photocopier too.
Oh yeah, that's true. I'll give you that one. That is true.
I'm sure Q would have had a gadget. Well, actually, I suppose he wouldn't be able to go to Q right now. But they must have had cameras that they could have used. But yeah, so it does. Yeah, it is very bulky.
Yeah, but you would think a photocopy or a paper copier, like a lawyer's office, probably would have one. Like, don't need to bring your own.
True.
But I'm not an international super spy. I don't know. And then basically Bond sets this safe cracker up, and it takes a while. And we get this, I like this moment where Bond sits there and is just visibly bored. Like, he puts his hand in his fist, like, humph.
That's how I was feeling at this point watching the film as well. Like a reflection.
But eventually, being bored, he finds a Playboy. So he gets to read his little Playboy. And it's, it's a little bit creepy nowadays, but it still made me laugh, where it's just like, he turns it to its side. And I think the idea is that the Playboy always had that big double feature in the middle of the magazine, where it'd be a full spread over the 2 pages. So the point there, I think, is that turning it on its side is seeing that. And he just looks at that and smiles and is like, oh, all right, Bond.
Yeah, I thought all right, fair enough. Yeah, Bond's in this little office by himself. He keeps the Playboy and keeps on looking at it outside.
Yeah, when he leaves, he's just reading a Playboy.
It's just straight out in the open. Again, to the side with the fold out middle, in full view. Come on, Bond.
Yeah, it's not the coolest he's been.
No, definitely not.
And also in between this is where we get that scene of Tracy talking to Draco saying, I'm in love with Bond, and hopefully Bond can love me someday, which again is another reason why I think maybe Bond isn't quite there yet, but that's just a little thing we get while this whole office scene is playing out.
Wow, I totally missed that.
Did you?
I was too busy thinking about the Playboy, clearly.
Yeah, it must have been. But the interesting thing about this scene is that it's a very classic Bond spy scene. You know, he goes into a place and he's looking for documents, and he breaks into a safe and scans the document, but I didn't really feel any stakes with this one at all.
No.
They normally put a little bit more effort in making this feel a bit more tense. Like, oh no, there's a gun poking out by the window, or we know there's somebody nearby. And there's a little bit of that of the lawyer coming back to the office, but really Bond just goes in, scans some docs, and just leaves reading a Playboy. It's weird that this didn't quite have that same... these scenes usually aren't super tense, but it seems like they didn't put in the effort to make these feel really tense at all.
Yeah, they've done tense scenes like this before well, and they had the tense music, but nothing to go with it. So you're right, I was expecting that the lawyer was meant to be away for an hour, which would give Bond that window of time. So I was expecting, as it was getting closer to on the hour, because he set up a little alarm, is that you'd end up with a bit more, something goes wrong, or... I don't know. He can't. The lawyer comes back early, and we're getting scenes of the lawyer almost at the door, sort of thing, about to open, so he just to jump out or whatever. But no, Bond just does it and leaves. And it's close, he passes by the lawyer as he exits his office and goes down to the lift. But it's I thought there'd be a bit more to that, but no, he just does it and leaves.
Yeah, it's just weird because I think that's supposed to be in there. The lawyer does come back early. It just never even gets close, and Bond just easily leaves. So it's just weird. It's nothing really to do with George Lazenby or anything like that. It just seems why did you get this wrong when you got it right in so many other films?
Yeah. So he grabs a few bits of paper from the safe concerning Blofeld and photocopies them. And then we get a scene at M's house, which when the scene started and you see this big, grand, stately home and getting driven there and it's all looking very fancy, I was like, what was this bit again? I'd completely forgot. And then you find out, it's actually Bond visiting M at home, which to me, if I think of that, I usually think of Daniel Craig and Judi Dench and when he breaks into her house. But I completely forgot that. I mean, he didn't break in, obviously, but I forgot that you had this M at home scene where you find out he's a massive butterfly collector. There's probably a term for that.
Butterfile, I think they call him.
Butterfile? Is it really butterfile?
No, they don't.
That's people who like butter.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, the butter people, trademarked. Butterfile. Butterfly file doesn't work quite so well.
Lurpak all the way, thank you very much. But yeah, he goes and visits them at home just to show off what he found from the lawyer's office. Again, there's this. It's an attempt to do the Sean Bond, but with George Lazenby, where he's commenting on one of the butterflies, and that's a large version of this species of butterfly, and it's meant to be like, Bond knows about butterflies. That's funny, and he's sort of upstaging M. But no, it just doesn't work for me. A little thing, but anyway.
It's cool to see M's home and stuff, but this should have just been cut from the film. Without Sean Connery here, it doesn't really work, and it just seemed like a bit of a missed opportunity. And it does, like you say, the Daniel Craig M scene works really well with their relationship. This is just like Bernard Lee maybe just legitimately messing around with butterflies and just draws ladies like, what's up? So here's a letter, and then they just move on. Probably should have been cut.
Yeah, because that is really it. He just shows them a letter and says, hey, I found, it's a very, very big, another big bit of spiel, exposition set up where Bond starts to explain. I'm going to leave you to explain this bit, Tom.
No.
So I don't want to get involved.
No.
Yeah.
So I think
here we go.
Here. Basically, so we know that the lawyer represents Blofeld, who is using a pseudonym, using a fake name. And the person or Blofeld using that fake name has written to the London College of Arms asking to be recognised formally as a count so he can... I don't know why, I'll be honest with you. But basically, he wants to get somebody from the college over to his facility in order to verify his lineage and give him that title officially. So Bond says, I'm going to go to the college and ask them if I can, as matter of national interest, pose as that person from the College of Arms and go instead of the person they were going to send.
You did that is bravo for that. That was a very good explanation, because that's better than Bond said in the film.
Oh, what was he on about?
It's so long, and I swear it was like one take. Oh, that'll do. It was like one continuous bit of dialogue. So long. And I was barely following it. So, you did a good job there. Well
I picked most of this up after the fact. As you say, no, it's fading to a college, and I'm just like, what college is that? What? College of Arms? I've never heard of the College of Arms. That needed more explanation in itself. But yeah, again, I put that all together once the film all came together, because you get that more, it makes more sense once this all plays out. But yeah, this was very much that classic Bond moment of just don't worry about it. It's fine. Bond needs to go somewhere. There's a bad guy. It's fine.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
So then, as part of that transition, we have Bond going to the College of Arms in London, where he's talking to one of I believe it's a professor. And we get a really cute moment here. And again, it's only cute in retrospect, where he is the guy who's in charge of these arms and these coat of arms is showing Bond. Is it his coat of arms, Bond's coat of arms? Or is it someone else's?
Yeah, yes, his heraldry, whatever it is, yeah.
Yeah, so this is the one for James Bond, and we have the bit in Latin. It's in Latin, right? I want to say.
Yeah.
And he says, "Hey, good motto, eh? The world is not enough." Yeah, again, it's a throwaway line in this film, and it is quite a nice line and quite a nice tie to Bond. But yeah, this is where that came from. It
Honestly,
wasn't just the Christmas Jones or whatever.
I mean, a great idea for them to use that as a film title. It's not a Fleming book name. So great, yeah. And I think you're right. Like if people seeing this in 1969, will be like, okay, whatever, that's kind of cool. But in retrospect, oh, there it is.
Yeah, it's weird when like Blofeld later says, "Haha, I will take over the Quantum of Solace." I'm like, that's a bit out of context. That's cool, but okay. Hope that doesn't come back.
It was a weird American Blofeld. That's why.
Yeah, Quantum of Solace. So very briefly with the scene, we have a very kind of overly enthusiastic Professor Guy who's like, "Oh yes, that's all fine for Queen and Country. Very good, very good."
Wow, it's like he's right here. That's a very good impression.
Yeah, and basically agrees, and he says, "This is all quite shady. I need to send them a description of what I look like, and then you'll be collected." And then he warns Bond, "Watch out for the man without earlobes. That's how you know that's the guy." And with that information, we go from, again, we're cutting a lot to different locations because we went from Portugal very quickly to Switzerland, the Switzerland Laura scene, to M's house, I'm assuming in England, and then London to go to this college, and now we're straight back to Switzerland. And we cut to Bond we cut to this tram going along this quite snowy area with everyone hanging out of it, being very touristy, I guess. And then we see Bond come out of this tram to meet up with a woman, and Bond is dressed up as, I would call it Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, yeah, it's Sherlock Holmes. It's definitely.
With glasses.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to leave this to you. What did you think of George Lazenby disguising himself as a Hilly?
Oh, Hilly. I thought it was great. Now, the thing I did not like, which we got a little bit of in that previous scene with the College of Arms. So, what was the reason to have the voice mimic? Because, well, I guess you can argue in the scheme of the story, they've probably already spoken over the phone. So that's why Bond needs to sound like the guy. But what that means in terms of filmmaking, because apparently George Lazenby couldn't do a very good impression of the actual Hilary Bray, they just dubbed him. They dubbed him with the actual guy. So for large bits of this film, you get really, for me, like off-putting dubbed voice for Bond when he's in front of Blofeld and everyone, when he eventually gets to him. I don't know, it's just a strange choice. Like, could you not have just said, oh, well, just not say anything? Why do you need to put on a voice impression? Strange choice.
It's strange, and I can't argue with anything you said, but I liked it. I liked seeing Bond go all in with actually going undercover. I mean, we spoke about it in the last episode with You Only Live Twice, where part of Sean Connery's Bond is that he does not care at all. He is just going to be himself 100%, but just call me Bill or something. It's me, Bill. I'm completely new now. Mr. Fisher, I think actually was. But,
oh, yeah.
Yeah, like he does not care. So I quite liked it, and I think it worked quite well as a new Bond is going to go undercover and actually put in all this effort. Again, it's different, but I think this is one of the cases where it was different, and I actually quite liked it. It felt a little bit more distinct, and it was nice to see Bond do a different type of spy work and actually put in some efforts. You're not wrong about the dubbing, but I liked that he did have a different voice, even if they had to do it in a very kind of not great way.
I absolutely agree with the whole having to have this whole persona and disguise as Hilary Bray. And we see that in this scene that we're talking about where he meets Bunt. What was her first name?
It's good, dude. No idea.
Fraulein, but I think that's just like title. But yeah, let's just call her Bunt.
Censor that. We'll have to censor that.
He meets her and they end up. What the point I'm trying to make is that they end up on a helicopter, and Bond, as Hilary Bray, is pretending to be anxious and getting sick, which obviously Bond wouldn't do that because he's been in many helicopters. So I like that. I really like that he's pretending to do that and doing a good job. But I just think, going back to the voice thing, and if George Lazenby couldn't do a good accent or a good different voice as a disguise, just don't do it. Don't. If it was his own voice doing that different accent, I would have liked it a lot more. But I think because I knew it was a dub, it didn't work for me. Anyway, I won't keep on about that.
You're totally not wrong, but these films so far have been so full of dubs. I think I'm somewhat immune to it now. Where
Dubbed
it just
out,
doesn't.
yeah.
It's just like part of the territory, right? You're going to get some bad dubs, and I appreciate what they were trying to do, even if they didn't do it the right way.
Yeah, that's true. I should be used to it by now. I'm still not, though. I also forgot to mention that as Bond meets Bunt, we do see that one of Draco's men is still there. The blonde one is still watching.
No, that's not Draco's men.
Is it not?
Well, maybe it is, but I took it as being like a friend of Bond because he was British.
Oh. Okay. Yeah,
because I think Draco's men would not be British. He would be like Portuguese or something like that. He would match his personality or that kind of look. But I think they very intentionally, he's super British. And to me, that made me think, oh, actually, that's probably someone Bond knows potentially.
Actually, you know what? I think you're right. In the book, I think it is someone like that. Yeah. But wait, was it not the same guy who delivered the safe cracking?
Yeah, it was the construction worker guy.
Oh, see, because that was like Draco's construction site, I just assumed it was one of his goons. But
I think like in that scene, I think that's a very safe assumption. But to me,
right,
once we hear him speak, I'm like, that's probably one of Bond's guys.
When you start seeing him arguing later on, like, oh yeah, definitely British, definitely.
Oh goodness me!
I want to get up.
Can a man climb a mountain anymore?
I'm going to complain about this.
Bloody ridiculous.
Anyway, so yeah, he's got some help basically. He's being watched. So Bond and Bunt. I want to see that as a show. They end up going up to his Gloria, which is where Blofeld is, and this is like where your first proper look of Bunt. And I really like this character. I think she's great. I think they like really nailed the casting choice. Like she just looks terrible.
Yeah, mean. Like she doesn't get much character development. She's just this quite unpleasant woman who works for Blofeld, and for that, 5 stars. She pulls it off.
Yeah, I don't know, something about her. I really warmed to her.
You really warmed to Bunt.
I'm a big Bunt fan. But yeah, they get to the Piz Gloria clinic at the top near the Alps, and as I say, Bond's doing his best to keep in disguise and pretend to be basically a nerd. Like, oh, I don't like sports. Oh, I don't like
not a sporting man.
Not a sporting man. So yeah, very much keeping in with being a little dweeb. But that doesn't really last for much longer, to be honest, when he meets all the women. But yeah, they get to Piz Gloria. Great. I mean, this is where we were saying earlier, the film kind of lacks those big vistas and those big scenic shots and really selling the location of the film. But you get it all here because, like, of course you would with these sort of views. You get these lovely shots of the mountain and all the snow and the chateaus and ski resorts, all the stuff they fly past. It's very, very nice. Visually very nice.
Yeah, I agree.
It's easy though. It's an easy thing to get right.
That's what I was going to say. I feel like a lot of the great shots in this film is because it's such a perfect setting for a Bond film. It's just perfect and it just looks incredible. And I was thinking that like last year I went to Iceland on holiday, which it wasn't quite as mountainous as this, but again, those sort of frozen snowy landscapes, I got to see a load of those waterfalls and stuff, and it looks absolutely incredible. And seeing this in the film, it was so smart to do this, but like you say, kind of easy. I feel like in You Only Live Twice, the people behind that film, the director, cinematographer, they really enhanced the shots by framing them and setting them up in a way that made them better, where this one was basically, it's an incredible view, so let's just point a camera at the mountains and it's going to look great because it's a camera at amazing looking mountains, but they're not really like enhanced by that. I feel like somebody who was a little bit, if the people who, maybe it's the same people and the same cinematographer, but I feel like a really great filmmaker could have really gone crazy with this and had an amazing looking film. And while it still looks good, just it doesn't look as good as potentially it could do considering the setting.
Yeah, as you say, I mean, I just assumed that wasn't a real place when I was younger. Like, surely that's not a real place, that tiny little thing on top of a mountain, but it really is. Like, that's just mad. Yeah, they were a good find.
Yeah, like no green screen or set or anything, right? It's
No,
just get some cameras, look around. That's a film.
Bob's your uncle.
Yeah, so eventually they land on this on the helipad. Bond saying, as you say, with the signals, we get some very nice. I put string music. I can't really remember a lot of the music in this film, but this was another time where I noticed that the music in this film is very different to the other ones. It just doesn't feel like a John Barry score to me, and this was kind of part of it. It was a slower moment, but it was just a very different kind of style. But after that, they go inside. She calls. Hold on, let me see if I can get this right. So yeah, so basically, Bond gets sent away. So he's still in his big nerd get up. She's like, "Off, go over there to your room." And Bunt, I don't feel comfortable saying that word, but I'll get used to it. Then goes to the phone and calls someone who is Blofeld. Basically,
What?
they don't outright say it, but we get a shot of the camera right above him. We get the bald head. We get the cat.
Yeah.
And I want to say this is the only time in the whole film we get to see the cat with Blofeld.
We see the cat again, but only because this bit stood out to me is he dumps this cat on the table at one point. Like he just throws it. He's done with this cat. But yeah, I think we get the cat at least one other time.
Okay, fair enough. But it's mostly for this scene. Like, they don't show the cat that often. But in this scene of somebody on the phone, it's like, yeah, okay, if you want to tell people it's Blofeld, then here you go. And I did actually quite like that they were like giving us the classic Blofeld kind of look and shot. And it was a very different looking kind of shot compared to the other ones. But it was nice to be like, oh, yeah, Blofeld. Like, we already knew it was him, but it was nice to have that confirmed in that way.
I guess this is part of a wider topic about this Blofeld. Maybe this is something more for the end, but I do wonder, like, what would this film have benefited of Blofeld not looking like, the bald man with the white cat? But then that kind of goes against what else they've done in the film, trying to connect them together. But yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I think it would have been more interesting if it was actually not the stereotype. Well, I guess it wasn't a stereotype then, but that what they'd set up in the previous film.
Yeah, maybe. Like, if this was basically the exact same character and villain, but he wasn't called Blofeld. Like, would that actually make it better? I don't know, but potentially.
So yeah, Bond was sent to his room where he drops off his stuff and does a little snoop around the room, I guess for bugs and things like that. Because it's sort of explained to him how the clinic works, and it's kind of strange how you're effectively locked into your room. You have to buzz to get out and stuff like that. So, alarm bells ringing is a very strange setup. So he's looking around and trying to find stuff. I don't think he actually does, though, in the end. But gets dressed and gets ready for dinner with Bunt. I'm going to say like Bunt. I feel safer saying Bunt rather than Bunt.
Bunt. Yeah, maybe Bunt's better.
And this is where another shot that really stood out in my mind beforehand is the shot. He comes out, he's got dressed, ready for dinner, for drinks, whatever it is, in the main room of this place, and he's in the kilt. I guess Hilary Bray is of Scottish ancestry, so he's got to match up, and we get Bond in a kilt, and it's just like, wow, there he is. He's got the little pouch and everything. I don't know. I don't think it looks bad, but it's like, oh, that's different.
Yeah, it stands out, but I'm going to stand by what I said before. I generally quite like the way Bond dresses in this film. It's very distinctive and very different. But it's like, I'm kind of here for it. Like, not so much the frilly shirt, because I think that's a bit too much. I've got standards. Everyone does. But yeah, I like the kilt. Something different.
If this was a webcam podcast, Tom, you'd see my frilly shirt right now. And tears rolling down my cheeks.
Just like humph and just like flick the frilly to the side.
So yeah, Bond goes to the main room and meets Bunt, and this is where we're introduced to all the other women in this film, the angels as they're later described as of this clinic, which is basically there to solve allergens. We find out all these girls have had allergies, and they're all here to be cured. They were allergic to chicken or allergic to, I don't know, plants. It is strange. I always forget how strange this part of the film is in the clinic. Because, as I say earlier, we don't know what's going on here. We're learning at the same time Bond does. We're learning that this place does allergies, and there's all these women here, and they're all kind of a bit strange. They're all like very enthusiastic and happy to be there, and yeah, and they're all kind of different ethnicities from all over the world, and you sort of like, what is going on in this point of the film? And you kind of see that in Bond as well. But obviously, with that many women, it's a great chance to have some quips and stuff because they're all sitting down for dinner and talking about why they're there. And Bond is giving his textbook memory of all the heraldry stuff that he was learning, which again is good. I like how you're seeing the effort, the process that Bond has put in to become this persona. You know, actually doing spy work, rolling off all this stuff about crests and titles and all this sort of stuff, nobility at the dinner table. As is the case with a lot of this film, I did think the editing was a bit strange because it ends up being a bit of a montage of them eating dinner and discussing, and it's kind of weird overhead shots of food being eaten, which I thought didn't really work. I don't know. Again, small thing, but it looked weird to me.
It does look weird, but I like it because it ties into what you're saying about how this is all very odd, this setting with all these women who are overly enthusiastic in this like resort in the middle of the Alps.
Yeah.
And I feel like what this scene does of all them eating, so basically all this food comes out and all the women have like very different types of food. Like I guess it's just whatever they want to eat and whatever they like. So I feel like one has like just sweet corn and one has like chicken dippers or something. Like it's a big range, and Bond has a steak. But yeah, again, it is very uncomfortable, but it ties into something that I like about how they present this area and calling them the angels. And I think they're eventually called the angels of death, that this is supposed to be otherworldly. This is supposed to be a very strange, bizarre place where something isn't right. So even if maybe in that moment it doesn't make sense to have all these uncomfortable cuts of them eating their food, you are supposed to be uncomfortable like Bond is, and this is supposed to feel very weird and different. And I like that they kind of emphasize that with the editing style. So I actually really like this. I really like this setup because of how different and weird and unsettling a lot of this is.
Did you like all the Golden Ball talk?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just that's the sort of, that's the other end of it where you're getting back to familiar territory. It's all weird, but it's not too weird because we get all one of the markings on a crest is Golden Ball as described, and they'll start giggling. Oh, how many have you got? I've got 3. And I should also mention that Bunt is there, and she's being very very strange. She's being very secretive with the information that all the girls can reveal, and so kind of keeping them in their place, sort of as a headmistress type thing, which you could sort of gather anyway, judging by the way she looks. But this sort of solidifies that she's definitely hiding stuff going on.
Yeah, all very strange. So this eventually leads to one of the women. Is this Ruby initially?
Yeah,
the one from, I want to say, Manchester.
Somewhere, chicken farm is all the thing. That's the thing I remember.
Okay, chicken farm lady.
Chicken farm lady.
Basically is like, hey, you should come to my room. And Bunt's like, no, that's not happening. So because Bond is wearing a kilt and Ruby somehow has a pen, she writes something on the inside of his leg. And I don't know which way round this happened. Did they come up with the kilt and saying, okay, what's a sexy way that we could have a kilt scene? Or did they say, we want a woman to write something in the inside of Bond's leg. How can we do that? Right, we'll put him in a kilt.
I'd lean towards the second, but I guess it worked well. It worked well in the end.
Yeah, so he writes, or she writes something on the inside of his leg, which Bond says, just felt a slight stiffness coming on.
Oh, yeah. To be fair, that's probably the one that works the best to me.
Yeah.
Because it's so bad, it's good.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed that one. But something that kind of happens with all this scene, to cut ahead a little bit, where all the women afterwards, when talking to Bond directly, is saying, oh, Hilly, I didn't think you liked women. And did you get any impression of that in this scene?
Because one of them says, oh, I know what he's allergic to, implying he's allergic to women. No. Well, I guess it's just him putting on that persona and trying to keep it up. being a nerd, that they just took that all at face value. But there wasn't much emphasis on it for then how much they end up saying it. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
guess they're not trying to say he's gay or homosexual or anything like that. I think, yeah, it must just be you're such a bookworm, you don't even know what you would do with a woman or something. Like I guess it's a very old school style of thinking of nerds aren't interested in women.
yeah, I think you're right. I mean, he is a book nerd who keeps reeling off about all the books and stuff like that. So I mean, and that's what the room stuff is all about, because it's like, oh, I can show you my book with all the pictures, and that's when she goes, no,
That bloody book. That book gets mentioned so often. I don't think we even get to see it.
We
One's just
don't.
like, I'll show you my book. And then she's like, let me see your book. And then not much reading happens after that.
No, let's put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, so after this, then Bond is taken away but a man comes to get him. And then we have actually quite a long section where he goes all through the base until eventually we get to this fancy office / lab type area where Bond then sits down and meets with, well, the Count. I think they call him the Count for a lot of this film. And
Yeah.
straight away we know that's Blofeld because we already saw him. But I think they kind of make a point of Bond recognizes who this is because of the earlobes thing, where the guy in the College of Arms says he doesn't have earlobes. So now Bond has found somebody in this facility who doesn't have earlobes. So it's like, oh, okay, that's Blofeld. But I guess this brings me on to a point, and it's something that I think is very known about this film, where I think it's supposed to be part of the continuity, but there's just a massive gap here in the logic where Blofeld and Bond have already met, but they just don't recognize each other. And you just kind of have to accept that.
Yep. I mean, it's fine. It's fine to do that because it's just you just go with it, as you say. With lots of things in Bond films, you just go with it. But you're right. It's because You Only Live Twice was meant to be the last one, so in the trilogy of Blofeld. So it doesn't make sense. I think there was an idea of saying that Bond got surgery to look like Hilary Bray, which would have linked into being a new actor, which is probably more hassle than it's worth. I'm glad they didn't do that, to be honest, and try and explain away the difference. So yeah, if you get over that they should actually recognize each other, it's fine. But you're right, it is a big continuity loophole.
Was it not in the book?
No, because this is the second book.
Oh, so they hadn't met yet.
They hadn't met yet.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. But yeah, again, it's unfortunate. It's one of these things that kind of, this is very much supposed to be part of this continuity, but you just have to put that aside. And that does, again, help separate it out as its own individual Bond film, but it's not meant to be. And it's just a little bit weird. I mean, it helps that these are two completely different actors. So Blofeld is not played by the same actor as the last film, and Bond is not played by the same actor from the last film as well. So that helps. It's good enough. It's just it's a bit of a shame.
So my question is, now that we're meeting Blofeld properly for the first time, we're getting actual dialogue between Bond and Blofeld. What do you think of? I think his name's Telly Savalas, who plays him in this film. Like, what do you think of this version of Blofeld?
I think he's fine. I would say overall he's okay. He's not as like visually distinctive as the last guy.
Donald Pleasance.
Yeah, as him. But I think it's a very different portrayal. And I think he does have decent presence. Like, he does have decent presence on screen, and him talking to James Bond, there is a presence there and a little bit of a threat there. So I don't think it's anything to write home about. And the fact that he doesn't really have anything kind of visually distinctive makes him quite forgettable. But I think he does a solid enough job. Like, it's a solid enough job, and I think he has a little bit more. Yeah, again, because he gets physical with Bond later in the film, and I think it makes more sense with this version of Blofeld than if it was the one from You Only Live Twice. Like, he sells it a little bit better, and I kind of like that they don't have the weird hand thing that they were trying to do last time. Like, this is a more vanilla version of Blofeld, but I think it works well enough for this film.
It really is a different type of Blofeld. Like, as we go on to see later in the film, he gets way more involved in the action aspects, like you say, fighting Bond and doing that physical things. I think And also, this Blofeld, like, you're seeing it in this scene mainly because of, I think, Teddy Savalas. I think he's quite a cool guy. Like, he's got a cool voice, like this really deep voice, and Blofeld is cool in this film. Like, I really like Blofeld, but in terms of like the actual character here, I think in relation to the film, I don't think it was a good idea, really, because, well, I think if they had tried to make this a little bit more of its own film, rather than keep pressing on about it's the same, it's the same Bond, it's the same Bond. Look, he was in these ones, he was in these ones. I think if they had almost kind of, I don't want to say reboot, right? Because I don't think that was reboots a thing back then. But if they had maybe just tried to start a bit more cleanly with this one, with the new Bond actor, and had this new Blofeld actor, I think it would have been great. But I think now that we're getting this really cool Blofeld, there's nothing like the nerdy Blofeld we've seen, as you say, with like the weird hand and everything and running away. It just doesn't really match up to me.
No, I mean, it does help that they've been recast. And, I said it earlier in the podcast where if you think of this film as its own individual Bond adventure, you will enjoy it a lot more.
Yes.
If you try and tie it to the other ones, things kind of fall apart a little bit, and your enjoyment of this film might hinge on your ability to kind of disconnect it, or if you want to disconnect it or not.
Yeah.
So basically this scene with Bond and Blofeld is quite a simple one, where Bond is still pretending to be Hillary, the guy from the College of Arms, and is asking like, oh, we've got to do this, this, and this, and this. There's lots of different things I need to do as part of the research. And Bond is almost like, it'll be a lot easier if you just came with me out of Switzerland and we go somewhere else. And he's just like, nope. He's like, okay then, fine. So that kind of wraps that up, and then he agrees, I'm going to do a ton of research. Or Bond agrees as Hillary to go and do a load of research, and he goes back to his hotel room.
Yep, that's kind of it. So Bond is back in his room, studying. I think he's reading some books. But get to the point now where, we need to go see Ruby. She wants to go see those pictures. She wants to go see the book. She needs
to see that book.
She needs to see that book. So we get Bond trying to sneak out of his room. As I say, like you need to be let out from the other side. So he has to break out of his own room, and tries unsuccessfully with a bit of metal, and actually kind of gave me a genuine jump scare when he does this. So he tries to like slide it in the door frame and unlatch it that way, like with some sort of electronic sensor. But yeah, it's like it's silent, and then there's this really loud zap. It actually made me jump. Like scariest part of a Bond film so far, by far, a door. But he sort of insulates it with a bit of rubber and kind of MacGyvers it, and again, it's kind of nice, like making use of the things he's got, and yeah, basically makes a gadget to break out of the room and goes to room number 8 where Ruby is, what he wrote on his leg, and sneaks into her room, and there she is on the bed, and she's there kind of all seductively, but Bond is there to get information, obviously. So he asks, well, yeah, maybe not completely, but he does ask her a lot about all this allergy stuff, and how did she join this clinic, and just a bit more background to what on earth is going on, because as you say, that was a very confusing scene at dinner, so trying to get a bit more information on it. Don't really think he finds out much, to be honest. I can't recall anything of much value he learns.
There's not much that she directly tells him. Just, I had a chicken allergy and they found me and then shipped me off here to give me a cure. So she doesn't really know what's going on.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. So yeah, anyway, they end up sleeping together. And then, do we get the hypnotism bit in this bit, or is it with the other woman?
No, it is with this bit, but you missed
one.
off the old kilt sliding off.
Oh, right. And she's like, oh, it is true. Or something.
It's true.
Oh, yeah.
So that was a bit uncomfortable. We didn't need that for Bond. We didn't need him dropping his kilt and the woman being like, oh my goodness, what a day this is.
I think that's the sexiest we've seen Bond so far, dropping his kilt. Anyway, after they're in bed together afterwards, and I guess it's like later on in the night now, because at some point like all the lights go weird, don't they? And like it just gets
Yeah.
very strange because I wrote down that it reminds me of. Have you seen Rocky Horror Picture Show?
I haven't, no.
Oh, okay. Like there's a bit in there where very similar, whether it's like in a bedroom, and it's like all these weird lights and just craziness happening because there's this strange tape that starts playing through the ceiling, and it's basically like a hypnotism thing that Ruby has to do. So she's like starts paying attention to it, and it's Blofeld very seductively talking and actually doing what seems to be like a legitimate hypnotism therapy, repetitive words about chicken. So it's so bizarre. Like I had sort of like an out of body thing where I'm like, I'm watching this Bond film and I'm just hearing these things about chicken in this like really sultry American accent. Like, what is going on? It's so strange.
Yeah, I again, it all ties into this whole otherworldly feel of this place, so I really liked it. And again, it's not
I
fully,
loved it.
Yeah, it didn't get fully explained here, but you're like, oh, Blofeld is putting these women in a trance. That's not good. Something's going on here. So yeah, this otherworld thing. But then after that, like we get Bond going back to his room where he says to himself, "Hilly, you old devil." It's like, why did he say that? Why did he call himself Hilly?
Oh, that's right, because he does it in the mirror, and then there's another woman there.
Yeah, he finds he goes back to his room. He's like, "Hilly, you old devil," just to find another woman who's like, "Oh, I escaped using the fingernail file."
Where's the book? Give me the book.
Basically, it's once again, it's like, we need that book. And this is quite funny because basically Bond used a load of pickup lines on Ruby about, you don't need to see a picture, you're a picture yourself. And then we get to hear Bond use the exact same lines on this other woman as well. So I actually quite enjoyed that little touch.
Yeah.
So after Bond then sleeps with her, because he definitely sleeps with her as well.
Oh yeah.
We then cut to the blonde man, Bond's friend at the ski resort nearby. He tries to get into the resort. So basically there's this ski or cable car that goes from a tourist kind of ski resort nearby to the facility, and he tries to get on, and it's just like, I just want to go and see the mountain. And they're just like, no, it's private. It's like, oh, I just want to take a look. And they get very mad and push him away. So basically, we're just seeing that this guy is trying to get to Bond, but it's very heavily locked down, so he can't get past the henchman.
Mm.
So then we cut back to Bond again in the morning, all dressed up as... I think he's dressed up as Sir Hilary again.
Yeah.
And Bond then says, your stiffness from last night, is it all gone?
Oh, that's right. Good old Bunt.
Good old Bunt. Yeah, again, it made me laugh. Like, it's such a... It's so, like, direct and blunt in what it's trying to do. It made me... Like, it caught me on guard enough where it made me laugh.
Yeah.
But while he is there and the women then are having a curling competition up there and Bond is joining in and slipping on the ice and acting the fool. As
so clumsy.
Say. So clumsy. He's not
Nerd.
a sporty man. Yeah, get him off. But then we see the blonde man is trying to he doesn't give up. He says, right, I'll just climb the mountain.
I want to see the film from his perspective.
Yeah.
Maybe he's another 00 agent. Who knows?
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, that'd be awesome if it was. Sad, but awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
But he straight up just tries to climb that peak. So basically the ski resort is on a nearby peak. So he's like, I'll just climb this one. And as he starts climbing up, they're just like, oh, there's a blonde Englishman climbing up the mountain.
Instantly. Oh,
just
shoot him.
instantly see him and just start shooting at him. And eventually they get him and capture the blonde man. Blofeld shows up and it's just like, yeah, get him out of here. Get rid of him. And it was at this point where Bond says, can I have a break? Can I get out of here? To basically try and meet up with the blonde man, because Blofeld is saying, send him back down the cable car. Bond says, can I take a break for the afternoon and take that same cable car? And he just says no. I think at this point is when also he states some sort of fact about the archives. Or is that later?
The bit that he ends up getting wrong.
Yeah, so I think he says something about a certain bit of document and research being in a certain archive to Blofeld,
Right.
which we later find out was incorrect information.
Yeah, it could have been there. I can't quite pinpoint, to be honest, now.
Yeah, and then this basically ends off, again, there's not too much to the scene, basically ends off with the women asking Bond, like, hey, we're going to, or just like hinting to him about seeing him in their room again. I think he says like 8, 9, 10, something like that. Like counts out the numbers.
Yeah. So I think it cuts pretty much straight to Bond doing that and going to visit the women in their rooms. And I think it's Ruby first, because I think it was number 8. He's like, Ruby, Hilly here.
Hilly!
He loves that nickname. I think he might keep that even after the film. Yeah, Hilly here, and he goes to like go on the bed, and you get this really... I'm just laughing at it now. It was so good. Who's on the bed? It's not Ruby. It's Bunt.
It's Bunt. Always Bunt.
It's Bunt. It's always Bunt when you least expect it. And yeah, kind of a bit of strange editing once again. He's sort of whacked over the back of the head and it's in slow motion for some reason. It looks really bad. But he's caught. And I actually forgot how quickly he gets caught at the clinic. It doesn't take long at all. I remember there being a bit more sleuthing around here, but no, it's straight onto it. He messed up and that's it. He goes to see Blofeld. Like, not much time wasted. I mean, I will say, like, in the whole film is like quite slow up to this point. It's a long film, as I've said, but I think it's from this point where it really, to me, like actually gets going now in terms of plot. So, yeah, Bond is caught and taken to the same room he was in when he met Blofeld, or the Count originally. And this is now where we're getting the evil plan spelled out for us. Blofeld, he may look different, but he's still has problems with revealing too much and not getting rid of Bond fully. So, yeah, as Tom said, kind of works out, as well as sneaking into Ruby's room, that they realised something was wrong when he was getting his facts wrong about the archives. So Blofeld just tells him what he was going to do and what's going on here. I don't know. It just seems like, why did he do that?
I don't know. I mean, we got to put it down to his cockiness, I guess. One thing I will just quickly say is that I like how this scene starts by Blofeld saying, "Merry Christmas, 007." I'm like, that's nice. Even though they're enemies, they still take the time to wish each other a Merry Christmas. That's very...
Yeah, because he's decorating the tree, isn't he? He's like putting a bit of tinsel or something.
Yeah, a bit of tinsel.
Tree.
Just Merry Christmas, ho, ho, ho. It's all very charming and nice. But yeah, it's kind of one of those where I think... We talked about it in the Goldfinger scene, where Goldfinger does give stuff away, but they kind of characterize him in that way. And also a lot of it in that scene is actually Bond figuring it out, which kind of makes it feel a little like takes that, that stereotypical, and now I'm going to tell you everything kind of plot.
Yeah.
I think they set that up very well, and that's kind of the best version of that scene we've had. And this one is, as you say, they just sit down quite gentlemanly and just have a chat, and it's just like, I'm going to destroy the world's economy, and here's how. Like, world leaders hate me.
Yeah.
Like, just straight up says it.
Because there's no... So he keeps Bond alive. Yeah, he keeps Bond alive after all this. And I think he does say... you'll prove useful, or something along those lines.
Yeah, it's like a bargaining chip, something like that.
Yeah, so I guess that's the implication is keeping him alive because he can use him when negotiating. But yeah, there was no reason to tell him the whole plan. But anyway, I guess it's for the audience, and I shouldn't complain. But the plan is, this is an allergy clinic, but what he's actually doing is developing he gave it a name. It was like Virus Omega or something like that. Do you recall that? Or Alpha? I don't know. Something mean sounding, which is basically a thing that causes all plants and animals to go sterile. And he wants to commit some nice bacteriological warfare. So he's using that as a ransom against all the governments and NATO and whatnot. And that's kind of it, really. That's his plan. Am I missing anything?
No, I think the main thing he's saying is that he wants to blackmail for money, but yeah, he specifically is like targeting food supplies. Like, he's not going to use this technology to make people infertile. He's going to do that to kill plants and food stock. So it seems like he's not trying to kill everyone. He's just trying to ruin their day and again be very specific about it. And this kind of made me think about Blofeld's plans because, we've seen quite a few of these Inspector's plans, but these are like he's never trying to take over the world. He just wants to be rich, I think. Because every time he's just like, give me a load of gold, give me a load of diamonds, or I'll mess you up. But he's never actually looking, maybe in Thunderball. No, maybe You Only Live Twice, what I'm thinking of. But generally speaking, he's just trying to manipulate people. So it's probably more of a power thing. But yeah, he doesn't actually want to take over the world at all. He just wants a ton of money from these governments. Although I think he also wants diplomatic immunity. I think we find out later as well. So,
yeah,
it's not such a bad guy, right? He's not... Maybe.
Yeah, I quite like that. Like we do learn that a little bit later on from M, but yeah, he wants amnesty from all of his wrongdoings, which is like, well, that makes sense, I suppose, given what he's actually done, and recognition as a count. So you're right. It's not quite like maniacal. I want to destroy everyone. It makes sense. Like, yeah, if you've done that, you want to get out of jail free card. So yeah,
definitely. And I think I liked Blofeld in this scene, and we really get to show off how different of a physical presence he had compared to the last film. He's sitting there smoking with his legs crossed. It's very calm and collected, but also quite casual and kind of loose. It's a very different portrayal. We really get to see this between him and George Lazenby. I mean, George Lazenby doesn't add anything to it, I won't lie. But it's nice to see Blofeld kind of be portrayed in this way now that everything's out in the open and they know who each other is and they're just talking as Bond and Blofeld at this point.
I'm telling you, Blofeld is really cool.
It's a cool dude.
It's a cool dude who just wants to be forgiven for his past horrible crimes, that's all. And murders and everything. But yeah.
Yeah, speaking of cool dudes, so we then go to find the blonde man who has been murdered, and Blofeld has him hanging upside down near a window of the facility, which is a really pretty gruesome image. This might be the most gruesome shot we've seen in the whole franchise up to this point.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just suddenly it's so quick, it's just out of nowhere. It's very, very, very impactful.
Yeah, I really like this setup because basically Bond gets locked away in outside where all the cogs and cables are for the cable cars, and basically Blofeld set up so here's your friend dead upside down frozen, and we're just going to leave you here to look at it. I don't know if you fully feel the weight of that, but it's that's pretty evil. That's a pretty evil place to keep Bond. I really like that from Blofeld.
Yeah, and he's doing it in his typical smarmy, suave voice, explaining, climbers fall down all the time, sort of thing, and really, really mocking Bond in this sense, and it really works well.
Yeah, he really sold it here. I really like this setup.
So yeah, Blofeld takes Bond and doesn't kill him, leaves him alive, so he instead locks him in this sort of gear mechanism cable car room where all the mechanical stuff is, which bit of an oversight really, given that there is a big gap to the outside. And what do you know? Bond's going to use that. So we do get a bit of, I don't really want to say action because it wasn't really that good, but a bit of a scene with Bond trying to escape using the timings of the cable car to avoid being crushed by a big mechanical wheel and fall down this big chasm below him, which was not at all a matte painting. No, that was real. That was absolutely real. Yeah, I don't know. I think I didn't really find this bit very interesting, to be honest with you. It was very, very simple. He's in the room, he sees there's a way out, so he just shimmies along the cable and gets out. That's that's it. Not really any wits used or anything. The only thing he does do is he rips out his pockets and uses them as gloves.
I mean, I really like that touch, and I actually did really like this stuff where it's that more stripped down Bond stuff that we saw back in Dr. No, where it's very basic solutions to kind of quite basic problems, really. And it's nice to see Bond just kind of at quite a low point just use these kind of more practical methods to do what he needs to do to get out, to escape. So sure, it's not very exciting. There's not much tension to it. And yeah, he does eventually just kind of escape. But I don't know. I like these sort of scenes, these more basic scenes where all he's doing is like, I need to climb these cables, but I can't really grip them. So I'll rip out my pockets and just do it like that. It's very practical, very old school Bond. So it was nice to see that after a few films where they very much didn't do anything like that.
Yeah, definitely no gadget reliance in this one as much. Is there any gadgets in this film, really?
There probably is, but I can't think of any off the top of my head.
Not coming from the previous couple Bond films where they really started to introduce them a lot. Definitely stripped back. I just thought, given the length of this film, I just think a lot of it went on for a bit too long, and this was one of those scenes for me. But meanwhile, that's all going on and Bond's escaping. You hear what Blofeld's doing with all the women. Well, I think it is actually after he escapes. It's around this time anyway, that you hear more of Blofeld's of the hypnotic directions that he's giving the women. I think it's because they opened presents, didn't they? Is this the bit with the presents where they open them and they're little receivers?
Yeah, so basically I don't know how they're knocking out these women, but they knock them all out. Blofeld says, I'm going to give you a load of instructions, which is open the presents, because it's Christmas and they're celebrating Christmas. So they all have Christmas presents, which are radio speakers, and they're just saying, Blofeld says, listen to this every night for instructions. So basically confirming that Blofeld is making them sleeper agents.
One thing I will say, so I watched this on the PlayStation, the Blu-ray on the PlayStation, and I had, because it was quite late when I was watching, I had headphones plugged straight in. You know how you have headphones plugged into the controller and listen that way. So I was getting true stereo sound of this in each ear, and I was getting some, I'm going to call it, now don't get this confused with something else that sounds very similar, some BSMR. It's like ASMR, but it's with Blofeld.
Now with extra Blofeld.
Because at one point, I think it was around this point in the film, like you could, at least for me, you're really getting the stereo effect of Blofeld in one ear and then in the other. It's just, and because of the voice he has, I was like, oh, this is weird, but I don't hate it.
It was late, as you say, though.
It was late. Maybe that was it. Anyway, we'll move past that. Don't focus on that. So Bond escapes, jumping on top of like an incoming cable car and jumping over the fence or the wall back into the clinic. And I think he breaks into, I think he knocks out a guard or does something to a guard and gets into the skiing equipment room or cupboard.
Yeah, like he fights a guard, which not much to say there. Exactly the same as the other fights. Lots of quick edits. Not great. But yeah, he beats up a guard to get the ski equipment.
Beats up a guard, gets the ski equipment, and then that's it. Right? He just gets on with it. We're getting on to the ski chases, of which there are quite a few in this film.
Yeah, so his plan is at this point now just to escape. So he's got the skis. Is he in the blue outfit?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, so he goes this full blue bodysuit, which I think is meant to be like a thermal suit because he's skiing. And I kind of like this setup because he instantly gets spotted. So he's trying to escape. So he's trying to ski down the mountain to the village down below. And he just instantly gets spotted. And normally I would say that's a bit silly, but I think he probably knew that was going to happen. It's just like, whatever choice do I have? And I'm just going to go. And I kind of like that. It's a very different setup for a Bond film, but I think it actually works really well as an opening setting of like, Bond just needs to get out of here because he's on the back foot and he's just going to go and just try and outrun everyone.
This is the first Bond ski chase, isn't it, of the franchise?
Oh, it must have been.
It must be. I was trying to think while watching, like, there's no other snowy parts of the previous Bond films. And this is where it all began, because like these sort of scenes have become quite common going forward. There is a lot of snow-based skiing, whatever, mountain chases. So this is kind of cool, and it was actually a really good first one. Like, there's some good stunts with this. So Bond obviously starts to ski away and gets chased by some henchmen, and even gets chased by Blofeld. Blofeld joins him, which I really it's like, what? Blofeld's going to join him, but yeah, he does. He gets on his little hat and his skis.
His little hat.
Yeah.
His little Blofeld hat.
A little Blofeld hat for his little bald head. And
It gets very cold.
oh, you might imagine. I mean, it must be
Nightmare.
freezing for him. So the one thing that really stood out to me in this ski chase as getting away from the clinic is at one point he loses one of his ski blades, and so he does like single blade skiing. I didn't even know that was a thing, but it looks really cool. Like just seeing that and knowing that someone's actually doing that, I was like, wow, I didn't know you could do that. I mean, I guess it's no different from snowboarding, really, but it looked really good.
Yeah, overall, I enjoyed the scene. The thing that's nice about this is that it's dark. Like, they keep it quite... It's not pitch black, but because Bond is escaping at night, it has this dark look to it, and I think it looks amazing because of that. Like, we get another skiing scene later, which is bright, but this one feels a little bit more... Even though he's going down this massive mountain, and it feels a little bit more claustrophobic and stuff, and I think that's really... really cool. Like, it has a really good vibe to it because of that. But, and like you say, the stunts are great. Obviously, it's not George Lazenby doing all this stuff and him being in that blue suit. We get a lot of like zoom outs where we see people doing these stunts, but it's quite impressive. It looks really good. Something I wasn't into, gonna get controversial here, is that I don't think the theme really worked too well with this scene. And it goes back to what I was saying at the very beginning of this podcast, where I just think this music doesn't really have any punch, and that doesn't make it bad. I still really, really like it, but it just kind of isn't very exciting. Like it doesn't feel big enough for this type of scene or anything like that. And we don't need something as big as like the James Bond theme. We don't need something to go as big as that, but this just, it needed a little bit more energy to it. It needed those big moments as he's going down the mountain to really make you feel it, and it just felt a little bit mismatched to me having this theme play over this type of chase scene.
Need a bit of a middle ground between the big bombastic Bond theme and the actual one that was used.
Yeah, just a little bit more weight here. But even then, it doesn't take too much away from it. But it's like, oh man, it's such a great song. It's just misused. It just shouldn't be here.
Let me tell you what else needed a bit more weight.
Oh, no.
So, at one point in this ski chase, Bond sort of goes to the side, but is still followed by a henchman. So I think... Or maybe he trips up. I can't really remember the details of it. But basically, he's one-on-one with the bad guy now. And it ends up being that the guy falls off the cliff. I can't really remember how he does, but he does.
So basically, like Bond is down to one. So he's being chased by three guys, or maybe four guys, and basically like two people go into trees. Bond then trips at the end and hides behind a mound, and then takes off his ski, and then as they jump over, he hits them with it.
Oh yeah, he gives them a good whack. Yeah.
So he does it twice, but yeah, as you say, the first one falls off a cliff.
And I just loved this little stunt because it's obviously a dummy. They have this dummy stuffed and put on ski clothes and given him all that sort of stuff, and then they just lob him off. And they must have really liked this special effect because they linger on it. You see the whole shot basically of this dummy falling down, and I was going to say it doesn't actually look too bad, really, if you don't focus on it too much, even though they've kind of forced you to look at it for quite a long time. It doesn't look bad until this is what makes or breaks it, is the sound design. And this really made me laugh. Like I think I had to like pause and just the sound it makes when it hits the snow at the end, because you see it from like bird's eye view as it's falling down. And then it just makes this teeny tiniest little scuff of a noise, and it's hilarious. I just loved it. Just what's actually happening on screen, and you just hear this little it's so good. Oh yeah, that made the whole ski chase for me, that one bit.
Yeah, it was amazing. It's like he falls for so long, but it's funny because they start with him being like, ah. And just like, I don't know if he's like screaming the whole time, but it's funny to hear someone be like, no, I'm falling, no.
God, that's such a great scene.
Like, you could have cut that down by half and it still would have been quite long. They just let it fall, and it does I do, not even just from a comedy standpoint, because it is hilarious and amazing, but even so, it is quite like daunting thinking about how far that guy falls. Like, he must be traveling at some speed at that point, and it does really emphasize, and I think this is probably what they were going for, just how insanely high up this cliff is and how insanely high these drops are in these mountains. I think that's what they were going for, and it does highlight that. But yeah, this is just amazing just to see it long, like it takes ages. And then the great thing is that after this guy falls, Bond does the same thing with someone else, but I don't think he falls off straight away, but eventually he does get pushed off. And then you hear a very similar, like, no, but you sadly don't cut to it. But the fact that it like reference it, like another guy has just fallen off, just kind of hits you again with that scene.
I know we're talking quite a lot on this podcast about doing our own fan edits, and I want to do that, but with the second guy just putting the exact same scene of the dummy falling down.
Yeah, I mean, it really gave me Homer falling off the cliff vibes. Like, it's just that scene.
Oh, so good. So good. I mean, this is a good scene, regardless of that dodgy dummy. I did like this bit. And in the book, they read that this is a really long part of the book, this whole chase scene, because there's a lot of focus on just how bashed up Bond is getting. I think in the book, the avalanche happens now, and like it's like really not gruesome, but you see how much it's taken on Bond physically. And I think the film does quite a good job. Like, by the end of the scene where he ends up skiing into the village, you see Bond, and like he's done for. Like, he just looks awful. He looks miserable.
Yeah, he trips and falls multiple times.
Yeah. Like,
this isn't a slick Bond escaping everyone. It's like, no, he messes up numerous times in this one. He just improvises enough. And, again, it's not as far as it doesn't sound like it goes as far as the book did from what you're describing. But yeah, compared to Sean Connery's Bond, we're getting close to maybe not a Daniel Craig levels of getting beaten up, but maybe like a Pierce Brosnan level of getting kind of beaten around.
Yeah.
So yeah, after that, again, great scene. But after that, we then cut to the women leaving on a bus, and Bunt is basically the chase isn't over. So Bond gets to the village, but the women are being left. I think the general idea is that Bond is trying to get to the women to stop them. Did I just invent that?
Oh, well, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not focused on, but I kind of got like, yes, initially Bond was trying to get away, but I thought they were trying to put it together that Bond was actually trying to get to these women because he knew that they were part of the plan somehow. So he just wanted to stop that from happening. Yeah. Because we get these shots of the women being taken away on the bus and leaving the facility, and also Bond in the same village being hunted down. And I assumed that he was trying to get to them. It's just that never happens.
That, or just trying to phone London, which he does try to do eventually.
Yeah, that's true. So now we have a chase scene, or the chase scene basically continues. The guards or the henchmen are still after Bond, and Bunt is there. And Bond jumps into a house in this village and has a wrestling or a bit of a fight with a man who, well, it doesn't cut around quite as much, I don't think. But this scene is quite terrible in a different way.
Terrible.
Because they are fighting in a room that is littered with bells everywhere. Yeah. And everything they do rings a ton of bells. And I didn't listen to it with earphones, and I found it extremely unpleasant. You at like midnight on your PlayStation. That must have been a nightmare.
It burst my eardrums.
Oh, that's sad to hear.
No, this scene sucked. I really don't get the inclusion of this. It was like, I don't know. It was bad.
Yeah, it was just a fight in a bellroom just to have a fight in a bellroom. Like, they didn't have a purpose. It was just so they get wrestled around. It was like, clang, 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 clang. Oh, please stop, please.
It's 12 o'clock at night. Please stop.
Yeah. Are you awake? Just checking.
Oh, yeah, keep me awake. Keep me on my toes. Maybe that's what they were doing for the rest of the audience.
Yeah, maybe. It's quite a long film.
Yep.
So then Bond does beat up the guy. He's still being chased, so he puts on the jacket and tries to hide in the crowd. And this is a kind of quite a nice scene in a weird way, because well, not a nice scene, but this is where I'm kind of talking about Bond being somewhere and you get a bit of a sense of the culture. I actually got some of that here because they're in this Switzerland village in the Alps, and it's very, it's Christmas. We already confirmed it was Christmas. We get like some Christmassy choir music in the background, and everyone's kind of enjoying this fair or whatever you would kind of call it, and we get that kind of sense of what this place is. Maybe a little bit like the Thunderball scene when Bond is being chased and is being chased with this big crowd. We kind of have another version of that, just this time it's Christmas in Switzerland rather than that big parade in the Bahamas.
Yeah, I really like this bit too. As I say, I think from this point on, the film to me gets a lot better, partly for what you're saying, like the whole cultural aspect of it and just seeing more of the world around Bond and not just at that clinic the whole time. But also, I wrote down that, but like we were complaining about the fight scenes and the editing style of them and wasn't quite great again, a bit sloppy. But I think that actually worked in the film's favor here, where they're trying to get that sort of disoriented feeling of Bond kind of pretty much being knocked out by the chase and confused and lost and scared. And yeah, I think having this kind of really crazy cutting, and there's like at one point there's like a weird bear that just like flash photography. And
that was so bizarre. Like it was a giant, it was someone in a polar bear outfit taking pictures, but the bear looks frightening.
Yeah.
Like terrifying. Like it's not a cartoon bear.
It's like Five Nights at Freddy's stuff.
Yeah, like 100%. And the thing that makes no sense is basically part of Bond being disoriented he takes the picture, but I'm pretty sure the bear is like laughing. Like, ha 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 ha. Like, I don't know if that's meant to be. Someone's laughing, and I thought it was that bear, but I was like, why is that bear laughing? Which is never a question you should ask when watching a Bond film. Like, it's gone places there. But yeah, we have like this dreamlike sequence where this crazy looking polar bear takes his picture and starts laughing. It's like, okay, all right, this Bond must have really hit his head pretty hard.
Yeah, I'm all for it though.
You were here for the polar bear.
Yeah, I really like this scene. Really good.
So this all eventually ends with Bond just sitting down. I think not to escape, just to take a break.
Yeah,
just to get off his feet. And would you look at that? Guess who skates up in front of him? It's
Bunt.
Tracy. Oh, it's the polar bear. And he marries the polar bear. And it's a very different film.
Oh, furries would love it.
Yeah, they're head of the game. So Tracy is there, and what's the explanation they give for Tracy being there coincidentally?
Basically that she got her dad to tell her where Bond was, and then she stayed close because she knew Bond was nearby.
I see. I did miss that, to be honest. I thought that was a bit odd. I let it slide, but that actually makes a lot more sense, especially with the way Tracy is before this point.
Yeah.
And then eventually they escape. A fireworks show goes off, and that creates enough of a distraction. And so there's some more weird editing here, just showing it being very chaotic with the fireworks, like lots of cuts and a lot of kind of like odd angles looking at these firework display. Because normally it's fireworks. Like I've been to enough fireworks shows. You're just sitting there being like, look at that one go in the sky. But this one's very like, let's jump all over the place to justify the guards. Like, can you imagine being in a firework village show and some guard, like people in the crowd are just like, oh, what's going on? I'm so confused. Loud noises. It was like enough to let someone get away.
It was very aggressive for a fireworks show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, they get into Tracy's iconic red car and they drive off.
So then we get even more chasing. The chase hasn't really stopped. It's been one continuous chase for a long time, except now we're with Tracy. A Tracy chasey. That's what I'm going to call it right now.
Perfect.
Yeah. It's just, I can't explain how it comes to me. But yeah, they follow her in the car behind her and Bond. They briefly stop because Bond tries to get out and, as I say, tries to ring London at a post office or something like that in a phone booth or outside a phone post office, and doesn't do it in time. Like, again, another example of Bond failing. Like, he tries to do it, but they catch up and start shooting at him. So back in the car they go, and then it gets a bit strange again because they suddenly, after a few more bits of driving and whatever, they end up in a race. They end up like breaking into this car race, like a destruction derby type thing. I don't know what it is, but it's just like, yeah, a very big race going on with all these cars bashing into each other. And obviously you got Bond and Tracy in one car and Bunt and the others right alongside them. And it's just chaos for a few minutes on screen. And it's kind of adds into what we've seen before about what on earth is going on. But I mean, it's good. It's kind of all slippy and slidey on the ice and stuff like that. But it has, I mean, there was one standout moment for me in this, and I'm sure you know what it is. Something we've spoke about repeatedly on this podcast now is speed of explosions of cars. And
yes.
This one is, I think it might be the fastest yet. So,
I don't know. I think Dr. No might have it beat.
Do you think so? So
we might have to time it and see.
I would like to do that. I'd like to get this nailed down because there's a bit of toing and froing, shooting between Bond and the bad guys and Tracy and all that. And eventually, Bunt and the henchman kind of skid out and flip their car in one of the corners. And it's honestly, the car flips. I think it's maybe, well, I don't know how many frames it is, but it is so ludicrously fast until this car explodes. It's great. It is great. And you even get this great scream from Bunt. It's just, the film was really good for Az, I got to say. Yeah, I don't really think there's much else to say about that little scene. It's just kind of,
I mean,
happens.
I'll be honest, I think this might be my favourite scene in the film.
Oh, really?
I had such a blast with this. So, first of all, I love that it takes place at night, and I love that it's this continuous chase. And we get some just going up to this, rally race, whatever you call it. We get some really cool shots on these thin roads. Like, it's very different. It's so different. And the fact that it's taking place at night, like, I feel like this film really takes advantage of that in terms of how it looks, and having the chase take place at night just adds something. Like, the Goldfinger chase technically did, but I just thought, like, whatever, that could have taken place during the day, who cares? But this one feels different because it took place at night, and it's, like you say, it's chaos.
Yeah.
But something I really like about it, and I think it really helps with Tracy's character, is that she's driving. Like, this isn't Bond driving a car. And to be fair, I guess You Only Live Twice technically did this, right? Because Aki was driving as well. But this one is like she is driving very aggressively. And if you want to like try and sell Tracy as a character as being Mrs. James Bond, this was a very smart way of doing it, of having her be this reckless driver, like helping James as James has been like kind of knocked down and stuff, but having her do that job and do it incredibly well. Like, they're in this race and against all these other racers who, like, they keep cutting to the racers themselves taking it seriously and trying to have a proper race. But then you just have, like, the guy or the henchman and Bunt and Tracy just ramming into them. And, like, they flip one over. And like you say, it's chaos. But, like, I think they do a really good job of directing and putting this scene together where you get what's going on. And it's just such a ton of fun. Like, it's such a fun scene. And I think it's such a great way of ending this type of chase scene where you get this real payoff of just chaos, but in such a deliberate, fun way. I genuinely think, apart from maybe the very last scene of the film, if you remove that one, this is probably my favorite scene. It's just so fun to watch.
Oh, yeah, you're totally right about setting up Tracy more as a realistic woman that Bond would actually settle down for. I mean, there quite a few times in the film you hear him go "good girl," which always I just don't like when he called her "good girl." But yeah, this is what would impress Bond, is handling this situation well. So maybe this scene actually serves for a bigger purpose in that way, especially in what follows afterwards when they're in the barn, but gives a reason for Bond to fall for Tracy even more because she saved his life.
Yeah, like, it's not spelled out, but it's just, I think, a smart way of doing it and having that kind of exist here. And it's, yeah. And the fact that they start shooting as well, like, I think later Bond films would try and do this type of sequence and go too silly with it. Like, would take a somewhat similar setup and go a little bit more silly. But this one was just the right amount for me. Just the right amount of actually having all these cars driving around and ramming each other and stuff and having silly stuff happening, but not nothing too wacky. It's just, it still feels quite brutal, all these cars ramming each other. And yeah, I loved it. I think this was the best action scene in the film.
Yeah, I'm going to go as far as to say I think the section from Bond's escape, the first ski chase, to this bit, so pretty much this whole chase through all the different elements of it, the different modes of transport and everything, was probably the best section of the film for me. If you would take it as a chunk, this is the part I probably enjoyed the most. Not just because of Bunt screaming and the dummy, I promise.
Well, that helps.
They help a lot, but I think this is the strongest for action-wise, and as we were just saying, like, I think, yeah, character-wise, it also kind of works as well. I mean, it's not as in-your-face character-wise, but you're getting it there in the background, so very good stuff.
Yeah, and this all eventually leads to, like you say, the car with Bunt explodes, and they basically get away. But they get to the point where they're in the Alps, so there's a big blizzard, they're running low on petrol, so eventually they find a barn and decide, hey, let's just stay here. There's some horses inside. And I like their little banter here, where, Bond is always the person that makes a joke about situation and things like that. But Tracy, when she enters and they're just saying how not great it is and having a joke, she's like, we should have called and booked. It was nice to see both Bond and Tracy, again, people who are supposed to be in love at this point, basically, both have that kind of little banter and that kind of back and forth. And I think whether they correctly and appropriately set up this romance for this scene, I actually did really enjoy their chemistry throughout this scene of them staying the night in the barn together.
Yeah. I still think it's more coming from Tracy, but I guess it takes two to tango. So I can't discredit George completely as much as I'd like to. No, I don't mean that really. But yeah, also in this scene, as we say, kind of falling in love aspect of it, and actually the realization from Bond that maybe this is the woman for him. So he proposes to her. How's about that?
Oh,
who would have seen that coming? Well, actually, me, because I read it. I read the book. But yeah, it's fun. It's like a nice little scene, I suppose. And the one thing I did write down is that there's a section where I think it's where he's about to go to sleep. I don't know what it is, but she takes off her hat, and this is the only thing I didn't love about it, is that they clearly set it up to have this, to really sell like just how beautiful Tracy is, and I almost expected like a harp to start playing, because this the lighting of it, and it had this sort of almost like they'd blurred the screen a bit, and it reminded me of like a 50s film, like a 40s film, where it was all blurry. And here they have like the main woman of the film, and she's looking all glitzy and sort of out of focus a little bit. She's just so stunning, and that's the only bit that I was like, oh, that just stood out to me to not really matching the rest. I mean, I know why they did it, but I was like, what film? What year is this film from again? 69?
Yeah, they probably didn't need that, but I didn't mind it too much because you get what they're going for. It's it's fine. It just probably didn't really need that, but yeah, he's like, I love you. I'll never find another girl like you. I think either she or him says Mr. and Mrs. James Bond, and they start talking about what city or country they want to get married in. Like, it all goes in, and again, I said it already, but it bears repeating. They didn't really set this up appropriately, and the elephant in the room here is that Bond just slept with two other women in the thing, and the film kind of depends on you kind of ignoring that, and that's why for me it makes sense that Bond had some interest in her at the beginning, but it's only the chase scene and them spending this extra time together, because they do talk while in the car. Probably not enough to justify this. Again, I don't think they have enough dialogue and the writing chops to make this fully work and be realized. But to me, I kind of need them to fall in love at this point, or Bond to fall in love with her at this point, just so the stuff that happens in the facility makes sense.
Yeah, and as I said earlier on, I think the whole sleeping, you're right, like having just slept with two women, it's kind of, if you really think about it, oh, that's not great. But trying to see this more positively in the sense of having slept with them two women who are clearly quite shown as being quite dumb, like they, or maybe not dumb, but in the sense of like they're being hypnotized and they're very childlike, and yeah, I think having that and Bond seeing women like that, maybe that's like, oh, actually, yeah, Tracy's the one for me. She's on my level, unlike these women.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I didn't get that from this film, but I could totally see how someone could see it that way. That Bond goes back to his old habits and realizes he doesn't want those old habits. Although he went back to Ruby again, he was like, Hilly's here. So I think there wasn't really showing any of that. So, but, you know, still, again, like the acting chops of Diana Riggs and Tracy sells it enough that to me it didn't bother me too much when watching the film. It's just one of those where when you look at it closely, you're like, actually, they didn't do a great job with that. But the scenes with them works because of her.
Yeah, totally.
So after that, they sleep together. There's a little joke here where Bond's like, oh, it's not our wedding night yet. We'll have to have separate beds. I'll do that as my New Year's resolution. And then he like knocks down her bed so she rolls onto him and saying, oh, it's not New Year's yet. Which I thought was quite funny. I like that bit.
She could have hurt herself doing that.
Yeah, she just does her back in and just can't.
Very different ending to the film.
Yeah, very different one. But then we cut to it being morning, and Blofeld and his henchman has caught up to them in the barn and finds the red car. But we see they're like, where have they gone? They're not here. But we see that Bond and Tracy are now skiing down the mountain together. And this time we get a second chase, but this time with Blofeld and with Bond and Tracy. And I have to say, like, it's a little much that they put 2 ski chases in this film. But I do think they did a good job, or as good a job as you could do, making them feel different. Where one's at night and it's just Bond, and one is very, has a very different feel to it, and this one is Bond and Tracy, and it is amazing seeing Tracy kind of doing these tricks and skiing along with Bond. Like, that is another way of like, yes, you can picture these two together because they are both skiing down this mountain in a very similar fashion.
Yeah, it's good for those reasons. You're right. I think I was a bit skied out by this point. You're right. Like, this happened straight after, no gap at all really, apart from the barn scene. And I just think like the one thing I do like about this upcoming ski chase is the whole avalanche aspect to it, which is another one of those things that separates it. But I just wish that maybe they were a bit more spaced out. I don't know. I think back to back like this kind of takes away from the second one maybe. But anyway, yeah. So they're skiing and they eventually again get chased by Blofeld and that, who can follow them. And so what Blofeld does, quite cleverly, is cause an avalanche to I don't know if he planned to actually capture them or just kill them, and they ended up staying alive, so he caught them. But yeah, he made an avalanche to get on with it. So, and actually, I was worried about this scene. As soon as it started, I thought, oh, avalanche, this is going to look bad. It actually looked pretty good. I mean, you can see some of the inserts from other footage and stock footage of avalanches, which is whatever. Like, they do that in all the films, basically. Especially the last one with all the volcano stuff. We saw that clear as day. But you could tell that they had some thought about like mixing in with special effects or don't know what it would be really, but like overlaying smaller scale stuff over shots of the skiers, and you can tell some of it was model work as the avalanche is going on. But it all kind of flowed together really quite well. Given the time of this film, I was just expecting this to look really crap. But no, well done.
Yeah, you can definitely tell the stuff that's fake, right? And that's a lot the case with all these films. But I think it helps that an avalanche like this is just visually incredibly impressive. Like, it just looks amazing. And this avalanche in this film feels huge. Like, it's so intimidating having someone go down the mountain being chased by this thing. Like, it's something that's been done a ton of times. You know, it's a bit of a trope at this point. But even in this film, it feels so huge that it's just such a cool, fun idea to see. Well, fun, maybe not the word, but it's such a cool idea to see kind of play out. And it's kind of what I was saying before with the mountains and how, maybe it wasn't the best well done in terms of shooting all the mountains, but they had such a good location that does a lot of the heavy lifting. I feel like that's somewhat true for this Avalanche, where it's just visually such an amazing idea that they were starting from such a strong point that even if some of the stuff doesn't really match up, it just is very impressive to see on screen. And for that reason, it was like, I really enjoyed this. It was really cool to see Bond and Tracy being chased by this such intimidating wall of snow. Really liked it.
It could have gone a lot worse, is what I was thinking as I was watching it. It could have been a lot more bad rear projection, and we have had, I think maybe it's still to come yet, but there has been some of that. And it could have been just a ton of that and stock footage. But yeah, as I say, they made some effort to try and blend things together and sell it a bit more. So yeah, good scene.
Yeah, I liked it. And this eventually leads to, as you say, Chase and Bond do get caught up in it. They don't just escape. They get hit by this avalanche and get tripped up and fall down. And this, they've both been kind of knocked out and Tracy gets captured. And I want to make sure I got this line right, because Blofeld says something and I wrote it as, like, they're like, should we get Bond or something? And he says, a grave so deep it can even keep 007 from walking. And I was like, that's a cool line. Like, that's a really cool line, especially after sending like this massive avalanche after Bond and really burying him. I hope I got that line correct and I heard it correct, because I remember that being like, yeah, Bond is the one who usually gets the cool line in the moments, but it was actually really nice to see like Blofeld say something quite intimidating after literally burying James Bond in snow.
I must have missed that line, but that doesn't make any sense, because they go take Tracy and he's right next to Tracy. He's not buried.
Well, he's a little buried.
He's a little buried, but I'm sure you can still see some blue of his like bright blue. Anyway, it is a cool line. I think because Telly Savalas has a cool voice, it works. But yeah, strange that it's just leave Bond. Don't need him.
Yeah, again, it's odd. I don't know. I don't think they justify that, do they? Not really.
Not really.
And interestingly enough, so that concludes that scene. We see Bond awake and get out of the snow, and we fade to Bond looking out of a window in M's office in London. We cut straight back to it, which I appreciate for the sake of the pacing of the film.
Yes.
But it's very strange to end on such a bummer note and have him actually be back. And also a really weird thing that happens in this film, as Bond is looking out the window, they like put footage of Tracy on the window from one of the other scenes. And I guess it doesn't look terrible, but it doesn't look good. It
doesn't look bad, but you're right. It wasn't impressive. So what was the point of doing it?
Like, we know Bond is thinking about Tracy. We don't need to see literal footage added into the window of Tracy. Oh yeah, her.
Oh, her from 20 seconds ago. Right, yeah.
That's the one.
Yeah. I think Bond just looking out the window would have been plenty. Looking pensive.
Yeah, you get it. You totally get it with that. But Bond is in M's office, and M takes a call and then tells 007, like, hey, Blofeld is making his threat, and basically we're going to take the offer. We're going to wipe out all his crimes. We're going to give him his Count title and money or whatever and things like that, where Bond is saying, I want to attack. Like, I know where this place is. If we go there and blow up the center of communications for this scheme, we can do that. But M says no, and basically is saying that, or Bond is trying to argue like, hey, Tracy has been kidnapped, we should probably go say her. Again, M says no, and again, this is a very short scene. Bond is quite visibly upset, which I think was quite a nice touch. So eventually Bond calls Draco and arranges to have a rescue mission and attack the facility using Draco's men instead of MI6 and going around M.
Mm-hmm. So after that, Bond makes his phone call to Draco and gets the operation underway. So we see them all kind of like very quickly. We're straight onto the operation. They've got all their helicopters ready. They've got all of Draco's henchmen in there, and off they go to Piz Gloria, ready to blow it up. It's like, I mean, as we've said before, for the sake of brevity, it's good that they're sort of moving swiftly on with this sort of stuff. We don't need a ton of setup. It's just time to go and blow it all up. So that's nice. And I really do like the whole bit with the helicopter and Draco, because basically they keep getting pinged about breaching airspace and stuff like that. So you just get these scenes of Draco really like flippantly playing it off, pretending to be Red Cross. We're trying to deliver blood and joking around with these people on the intercom, and kind of like what I was saying before with the scene with him and Bond at the fireplace very early on. I think just the actor kind of sells these sort of scenes and has like a sort of bit of cheekiness to him, which really works, especially for this sort of stuff. So yeah, all whilst that is going on, you have Blofeld with Tracy at the clinic, and he's just, I mean, I said that earlier I said that Blofeld was quite cool. He's not very cool here. He's just trying to schmooze Tracy, and it's not really working. Like, she's obviously having none of it. She's spouting off all. Is she spouting Shakespeare or something in this scene, or like?
I don't know.
I don't really know what she was trying to do here, but yeah, trying to just kind of ignore what it's saying, which kind of lessens the persona of Blofeld a little bit. But he is meant to be the bad guy, I suppose. But yeah,
I think they were a little bit conflicted here, where like Tracy needs to continue that persona we had of her being quite kind of what would be the word, stubborn, I guess. But Blofeld also needs to be that intimidating, somewhat cool kind of evil villain. And I feel like when putting these two characters in the room, it was probably just a bad idea, because somebody was always going to suffer, and Blofeld is the one that suffers. Tracy is the one that keeps her character, where Blofeld kind of takes a hit and seems a little bit Goldfinger-esque, is how he's kind of portrayed.
But I'll make you a countess. It's like, I already am one. Okay. Thanks, but no thanks. So we eventually get to the helicopters reaching the clinic. And I was saying about the car chase thing being chaos. This is like, honestly, this just goes mad at some points coming up. I can't actually remember how I think they just start shooting the windows out from the helicopter, but they eventually land and they all start coming out and everything. So the shot I was talking about earlier, I remembered it. We were talking about when Bond had the knife just coming up through the door to see Draco, and he was in that pose.
Yeah.
And like, oh, that's quite a cool pose. The other one, which I actually think doesn't look cool, but maybe they were trying to look cool, is Bond leaving the helicopter on like a sled or something.
Yes.
And he's like shooting as he's sliding down. And I think it's meant to look good, but I think it looks a bit silly. Anyway, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, I guess, what I'm trying to say.
Well, I think it's it's that whole thing, because this starts off initially with like just the helicopter storming it. And to be honest, this whole sequence with the helicopters and the way the orange sky looks and like made me think like, is this like a Vietnam film? Did they like, with this being 1969, is that too early? Because this feels like it kind of was taken straight out of a Vietnam film. Just put it in the jungle rather than the snow setting, and you kind of have a very similar thing, just a load of people storming people in helicopters. But like you say, Bond comes out and slides down. But while this is playing, they have the whole Bond theme playing, which is appropriate. Like, it works. Although one thing I would say is that they probably play it for a bit too long. Like, the Bond theme plays over most of this big shootout that goes on, and it probably should have cut off a bit sooner, because it's just a bit weird to hear the Bond theme kind of, maybe not in full, but like a massive part of it. You just don't normally get that. Even with the little Nelly scene, it wasn't played for that long. And for this one, I actually almost got a little bit sick of it. I'm like, okay, can we get some different music, please? Because it just kind of keeps going.
Well, the thing is, it does go on for a long time, but that's because it's played twice. And because it does, the first one stops, and then it starts again straight afterwards. But the thing I found so weird about this, I'm glad you brought up the Bond theme, because I wrote it down. So whilst they're attacking the helicopter, obviously Blofeld gets distracted, so he's off somewhere. So I think he tells Gunter, I think that might be that character's name, one of the henchmen, Blofeld's henchmen, to keep guard of Tracy. And they end up fighting and her escaping. It's not very interesting. But the thing that is interesting is the way that she gets rid of him is she impales him on these nails that are on the wall. And it's something I noticed early on in the film. I thought, that's strange. Why are there like these spiky things just randomly coming out of the wall there? So I'm glad it had a payoff, at least. It is very random, that he just gets kind of impaled on his back straight onto these. But the Bond theme actually ends with that. It doesn't end with anything Bond does. It ends with her doing that, and that's where you get like the twang of the end of it. But it doesn't even let the whole Bond theme end properly. Like, if you pay attention to it, it cuts out the end and just puts the twang in early. It's really strange.
I didn't pick up on that.
Because it's like dun 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 and then twang. It only does 2 dun-dun-dun-dun-us.
Well, that's not right. That's not okay. Pull it last on the list. Get it ranked. Get honestly, it down. Last.
When you notice it, you think that's such a strange choice that they had to cut the Bond theme early to make this scene work. But anyway, I do agree. The Bond theme is overplayed.
Yeah, I mean, so alongside this, as you say, Tracy is fighting Gunther, the guard. He's no hands, let's be honest.
Oh, who could be?
No one. Not many. Not even hands. But yeah, and I find this Tracy and Gunther fight goes on for too long. Like, they have a fight, and then she's like she hits someone with a bottle, and then like tries to jab him with a bottle, and then there's some wrestling going on, and then she like pushes him down the stairs, but then I think he like chokes her, and then she like scratches his face, and then this just goes on for too long. And I like what they were trying to do with like Tracy kind of, fighting back and not just being like, oh no, I've been captured. Like,
no, James.
Yeah, oh, James, help me. It's like, yeah, James is trying to help her, but she is also trying to survive. And I like that. It just, they could have done with editing this scene down a bit, focus maybe a bit more on the explosions, just have a little bit of fighting. Just got a bit uncomfortable just seeing Gunther just trying to like capture Tracy, and Tracy just doing horrible things to the man. Like, no one's winning here. They could have cut this down, and I think it would have been a bit stronger for it. Yeah,
totally. However, one thing that I'm glad they didn't cut. So I was saying that this bit goes a bit mad. This is so I was laughing because it's just great. So
this is the scientist.
This is the scientist.
Yes.
I love this scientist. So whilst that's happening, Bond is trying to get to the lower bit where Blofeld's office was and the lab is. I guess to try and chase Blofeld, right?
Yeah, I think Draco's men are rigging the place up to blow up, so that'll stop the plan. But Bond is specifically trying to get Blofeld, who is in the facility. And
yeah, we said earlier that it takes a little while. They showed how the path that Bond took to get here, and it goes through like sort of icy bit and very, very different change, very, very big change of a scenery sort of stuff. And at one point, he's about to go through a sort of a glass door, and in this corridor, this big glass wall. And this scientist just pops out of nowhere and literally throws a big potion bottle. What are they called? Those, like a flask, I guess.
A
beaker. That's it. He literally throws a giant beaker of acid or something that eats through the glass or plastic, whatever it was. It was great. It reminded me of like a Crash Bandicoot.
I was going to say it was straight up Crash Bandicoot. Like he's just holding it was bubbling.
It was smoking and bubbling like, oh, it's so
because acid is just acid. Like you just have acid in a glass. But no, they've made it in that very generic or like stereotypical looking beaker and flask and stuff like that. And then they have it a weird color as well. I can't remember, but it's quite a bright color. Then they have it bubbling, and then he's just like, he just lobs it at the wall.
Lobs it. I'm so glad you thought of Crash Bandicoot too. I was just, I love that bit. There's been a few parts of this film where I've gone, that is so dumb, but I love it.
Yeah, like it comes out of nowhere. You never see him before, and Bond just shoots him.
Yeah, and there's no more scientists. He was the only brave scientist who dared to fight back.
Not all heroes wear capes. But I think I got that slightly wrong. So I think Bond is searching the office so he knows the location of the women as well.
Oh, yeah.
Because he gets one of that long spy camera, which might be the first time we see that camera.
Spy camera?
Yeah, because he takes pictures of that world map.
Oh, right. The one that extends out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure it comes back in other films, but I think that's the first time we see it.
I remember yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, so after that amazing scientist scene,
love it.
Then basically Blofeld shows up and it becomes a little bit of a shootout. And Bond is chasing Blofeld. We find out he only has 5 minutes and 10 seconds until the whole place blows up. Tracy is freaking out, saying we need to go back for Bond, and Draco's like, nope, he knows what's going on. He knows the plan, so knocks her out, which, because it's her dad and we know what Tracy is like, it's like, I'll allow it. Like,
it was very much, it caught me off guard. Surely there's better ways to do that, but no, just punches her straight in the face.
yeah, it's kind of like, initially I was like, oh, that's not right. It's like a penalty in a football match. Like, let's review that. Take a look. It's like, okay, not great, but, we'll allow it. It's fine.
Given the circumstances where it's about to blow up, I suppose. Not that we're advocating violence here, but, in the context of the film.
It's fine. But then, this is why I think it's odd that they say 5 minutes, 10 seconds specifically, because we very quickly cut to both Bond and Blofeld just kind of jumping away from the facility and then it blowing up. Like, I don't know why they highlighted the time when the time really had nothing to do with anything.
No.
Because it just blew up when they left. So it's a bit weird. They specified 10 minutes and 10 seconds.
Yeah, because they even have the close-up of the guy setting the timer on it, don't they?
Yeah, like maybe they shot a load of footage which would have shown that more obviously, but decided to cut it down. Because again, Blofeld is just going to escape, and he does escape, and Bond's just right behind him. And it just happens that when Bond jumps off, it blows up.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to be honest now, Tom. We have mentioned that I watched this film rather late. So given how long this film is, and we are now very close to the end-ish, this whole scene with Bond and Blofeld and the bobsled, I don't remember much of it.
Right.
I'm going to hand this over to you again.
Okay, so it's very brief, this one. Well, it's not actually that brief. I think it's actually quite intense. Or not intense, but like, there's quite a few layers to it. So basically, yeah. So Blofeld is running away from Bond, basically, after the base has been blown up. He gets in a bobsled and goes down this big bobsled run, I think they're called. And Bond gets in another one and follows. And what we get is a lot of, they shoot each other a little bit. It's quite high speed, high action kind of here, to the point where Blofeld shoots enough bullets and just misses and then just throws the gun at him instead.
Oh, the hell with this.
Yeah. But weirdly enough, Blofeld then drops a grenade at his feet. I don't know if that was intentional, but then like throws it back, which then causes Bond's bobsled does get flipped and he gets thrown out of the run, but then Bond just runs ahead and then grabs onto Blofeld's bobsled and they have another wrestle. And this is another case of more odd fighting sounds being dubbed. Like, this might be some of the weirdest one here, where we get, it's not just like, we get like these breathing noises over the top, where it's just, again, it's them two wrestling. So which is probably why it's more breathing noises, because it's not them just punching each other, like they are just wrestling each other on this, and we just get some more weird noises which took me out of it. But either way, I still like this scene. Like, it is, I think it is pretty cool to see Bond directly chasing Blofeld, and unlike You Only Live Twice, getting kind of a payoff of them actually fighting each other, and the set piece of them being a bobsled where they're like moving extremely quickly, really cool. So despite the odd fighting sounds, I actually did quite like this fight as a final kind of showdown between Bond and Blofeld.
Yeah, especially what you just said there about the speed of it all. Kind of, I think we said about this in the From Russia with Love podcast, with the train and the fight with Grant, where you get that sense of danger, partly because they're fighting, but also because they're in this thing which is going very fast and loud. And so it's kind of the same thing here. Although... and the fact that, because Blofeld has been made to be seen as much more action oriented in this film. He's getting involved with the skiing and causing avalanches and everything. The fact, if we didn't have this, or at least something physical between the two characters, would have been a massive waste. So at least they have this. I still don't love this scene, if I'm going to be honest with you, because I think when it comes down to it, the actual fight is just a lot of like fumbling, and it doesn't really look that good. But if you think about what's going on, I suppose it's interesting. I just think visually it's a little bit lacking. And then we get, well, I forgot that Blofeld comes back at the end scene, but I thought this was actually how Blofeld died when
It looks like he dies.
I mean,
Definitely.
anyone would, right? He gets so basically they're fighting, and he's up higher whilst Bond is lower, and there's a tree branch over the bobsled. What are they called again? Runs.
I called him Run. They probably have a better name.
Yeah, there's like a branch hanging over, and he gets caught in it, like literally by his neck, gets caught in this tree branch, which should have killed him, or probably even decapitated him. I don't know physics involved, but yeah, he just gets wedged in there, and that's kind of like, oh, that's the end of Blofeld.
He's branched off.
Hey, that's all, folks.
That's not my words. It's Bond. Bond said it.
Oh, that's right. Oh my god,
that wasn't me.
Oh my god, I was just thinking, for Tom, that was pretty good. I'll give him that. That was actually in the film.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well done, George.
But we do see Blofeld later in a neck brace, so there we go.
I did like that. I really liked the neck brace, honestly.
Nice touch. Yeah, and after that, Bond is then kind of flung forward off the bobsled, and a dog shows up and licks his face, and he's like, "Good boy." It's like, what did? Was
I'm
there
not
a
going to
dog?
complain.
Yeah, was a dog part of this film the whole time behind the scenes?
Always in the background. You could, if you pause, you can see the dog.
Yeah, opening the door for Bond and stuff like that. And yeah, that's it. That's kind of that. Blofeld has been stopped. The world has been saved. So we get a fade to, I don't know, some city, which shows basically Bond going to get the rings or something like that. And we actually very quickly then cut to the wedding. As we already heard, Tracy and Bond are going to get married. They already agreed. And we very quickly cut to the end of the ceremony where we zoom in on the ring. We see Tracy all dressed up in the wedding dress and Bond all dressed up. And they're cutting a wedding cake. And this was very surreal seeing, because M, Moneypenny, and Q are all there. And I like that they're all there, but it was such an odd feeling seeing all of them like in this wedding setting talking to Bond getting married. Like, I think that's what they were going for, but like, it was odd.
Seeing them all out of the office environment like that, yeah, it was odd. I do really like the wedding scene though. I kind of wish that this was the whole film, was just the wedding, because you just get all the little bit between M and Draco. They have a little thing together, and you get Q and Bond talking together, and it's just really nice. And then you get Moneypenny crying, and because Bond's taken now. Her dream's gone. Maybe not dream, but yeah, that whole thing. And it's really sweet. I really like this ending bit with the wedding.
Yeah, it does really hammer home how well the characterization of M, Moneypenny, and Q and their relationship with Bond has been, even though we don't get a lot of time with these characters usually. But yeah, the fact that you can take them out of this setting and still have that relationship and have it feel different, but still those characters, it's definitely a massive testament to those actors and the writing of these films, especially just Q. It's just so nice having Q just like, well, I know we all haven't seen eye to eye, but well done, Bond. Like, very sweet. Very sweet.
Really is. And that's the end of the film.
There we go. That's all. Oh, and also I have to say, we get a hat scene. So as Bond is about to go away and Moneypenny is crying and looking sad, he throws her hat at her and she catches it, which I'm like, that's a really nice payoff for that scene. Bravo.
It really is. It really is. I'm not joking. I would love to have had the whole film just be, everyone drinking and just all the fun of a wedding. Oh, I want to go to a wedding if you can't tell.
What do you think? Like Bond and Q and M doing? What's it? Not the tango, the line.
The line?
Where you all go in a like.
The conga.
Yeah, conga. Da, 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 da.
Or singing Mr. Blue Sky, maybe.
Doing the chicken dance.
What a laugh. What a laugh that would have been. If only we were
Next
there.
time.
Next time.
So with the wedding all gone ahead and been very successful, Bond and Tracy are all in their gear and they're now married. So they get in the car and that's all covered in flowers and they're driving down the street or down this road, and basically they're talking about being married and their life that they're going to have together. She's like 3 boys, 3 girls, and Bond says, "Darling, we have all the time in the world," that classic line, and we have a car that drives past tooting their horn, congratulating them, and that basically triggers Bond to say, yeah, maybe it's a little bit too much, so decides to kind of pull over to the side and starts taking down the flowers. But as that is happening, we see another car go by, but we get a quick shot showing it's Bunt. Bunt is driving Blofeld is driving the car?
Yeah, Blofeld's driving, Bunt's got the gun.
Yeah, and Bunt's got the gun. Bunt shoots at them. Bond gets down and is like, that's Blofeld, and instantly gets in the car, is all ready to go, but looks to his left and sees that Tracy has been shot in the head and has been killed. And then we get a scene of basically a policeman comes by, and then we get George Lazenby saying it's kind of basically breaking down because as Bond, his wife has died, and kind of being a little bit in denial, but trying to stay in that good, in denial really, saying it's all right. She's just having a rest. We have all the time in the world. And then it shows the bullet hole in the windshield where the bullet went through and killed Tracy, and that's it. And the credits appear. So I'm just going to say I love this scene. It's such a gut punch. And it's just really well done. And I know you've criticized George Lazenby acting for this film, and I get it, but I don't quite agree. But I think in this one, he just does such a great job. Like, he really sells someone who's kind of, he just sells it. Like, it's quite complicated what they're trying to do here. It's not just someone who's just grieving and stuff. It's kind of done in a little bit more of a nuanced way. But I even really like the setup. Something bad's going to happen. And it was so smart to have a car drive past and to be a positive thing, to then have a second car drive past and kind of subvert that, where it's like, oh no, the next car is actually an assassination attempt. Like, it just plays out so smartly to kind of lead to this moment. But again, it's coming. Something is coming. And yes, maybe they ham it up a little bit with the way they're talking, but it just really kind of brings it all together to, again, that big gut punch of him of Tracy being killed. And that shot of the bullet shield is so brutal. And the fact that you just see her with the bullet in her head and she's dead, it's like that. Yeah, they really don't pull their punches on this one. And it's like, it's fantastic. I really enjoyed this ending scene.
Yeah, it's a great scene. For all of my issues with George Lazenby's acting throughout the film, as you said, he does sell it in this last one. He does a good job. The way he's sort of like caressing and the hand and everything, like you can really get that feeling. What I'm going to say though, or maybe you don't, but it's such a great scene that is just so quickly ruined by the Bond theme. I hate the ending of this film because of that. It could have been so good.
There's just no reason for that not to be "We Have All the Time in the World," right? There's just no reason for that song to not play instead.
It boggles my mind that they would have done that when they were editing. They must have seen that and thought, "Oh yeah, that's it. That's a good ending." Right, just stick this on the end, and maybe didn't even watch it.
Put
just
the Bond theme in. There we go.
And I wouldn't mind if the Bond theme was playing, but give it a few seconds. Give it just a moment for the audience to go, just breathe and take in what's happened. But you don't. It plays maybe, I don't know, less than 5 seconds after the Bond will return or whatever it says on screen at the time, with the windshield in the background and that gunshot, which was that used for Spectre or No Time to Die? The
Spectre. If
was
you're
it
talking
Spectre
about
they used that? Yeah. Which is, for Bond fans, it's quite an iconic image because of this very reason, and it's just such a waste.
I might be wrong on that. I know No Time to Die has all that references to this film, but when you say bullet shot, I think of the Spectre logo.
I think it is Spectre. I think you're right. But yeah, I really do like this last bit. I just wish they hadn't put the Bond theme in. I'm not going to bash. I'm not going to say it ruined it because you still had the scene in question, but just a poor choice for sure.
It's definitely a shame. I think it was a deliberate choice to intentionally take out that gut punch at the end. Like, I think they were like, this is probably a bit too far, so let's just have that Bond theme play to tie it a little bit more. I think they kind of chickened out a little bit, and they didn't want people leaving the cinema feeling that very last moment, and wanted to try and move away from that a little bit, which I don't think is the right choice at all. But I think it was a very deliberate choice to suck out some of that, how depressing it is.
You know what? I think that does make a lot of sense, because I was reading about the production of this, and the director, who we've said only did one film, said that he would have done the next one, Diamonds Are Forever, if George Lazenby had stayed, but during the production of the film, he quit. So they knew this was the one film for him, because the plan was to have this film end at the wedding and the death of Tracy occur in the pre-title sequence of the next film. And that would have been great.
Yeah,
that would have been a
definitely. That
great
definitely
choice.
would have been the one to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you can see why they've had to. Like, crap, we've got to stick it on this one now. And then you're right, they probably saw that and thought, oh, that's too bleak of an ending for Bond. We need it to be more positive. So then they just stick on the theme as a bit of a plaster to it. Totally makes sense, and I think you're probably bang on. But it's just a shame they had to do that.
Yeah, you're right. It's a shame. We talked about it before, and we've been here for a while now, so I won't go on about it. But if they could have executed their plans for this and keep the consistency with the actors and the consistency with the story, this would have just been like incredible. Like, there's so much potential to have this all pay off and be one of the most like satisfying, interesting kind of storylines in films. Like, going across like 7 different films. That would have been amazing if they could have done it. But
yeah, I mean, imagine that in a pre-title sequence of Tracy dying, and then the rest of the film being the revenge. Oh, it would have been amazing.
Yeah, go into Shirley Bassey theme. Like, what? Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was on Her Majesty's Secret Service. I went last time with my ranking first, so I am going to push it over to you, Joe, to start.
Well, interesting occurrence here. So my ranking has actually changed midway through this recording.
What? Breaking news.
I've changed my mind because of this discussion, and I think because it was very late when I was watching, and I was probably getting a bit grumpy, being tired. I think I was a bit more harsh on this than I should have been. So, given what we've said now, my ranking at the moment, From Russia of Love, Thunderball, Dr. No, You Only Live Twice, Goldfinger, I'm going to put this out of 6 now. I'm going to put it at 5. So I'm going to put it above Goldfinger, but still below the rest of the Sean Connery films for me.
Okay.
Mainly because of I just don't like I don't like George Lazenby particularly well, and I think that's the main thing that kind of takes away for me for this film. I think it's also a bit too long and a little bit repetitive of some things. There's definitely a lot of good stuff though. Definitely a lot of good stuff, a lot of good stunts. As I say, that whole section with the chase, basically from the clinic up until the barn scene, great, like really good stuff. But the rest of it had a few issues for me. And I think, I did touch on this, but I think the whole idea of wanting to have this, pushing the continuation of the character and making sure the audience knew it's the same Bond was just a little bit ham-fisted and didn't, I don't know, I almost feel like with the Blofeld that they chose, and I don't hate the Blofeld in this film and the interpretation of it, but I think it would have been stronger had they not had such a in-your-face go at linking the films together. So I think it was maybe a bit of a misguided choice creatively with that. But, you got to give it to them. Like, this was the first time this happened, so it's not going to be perfect. There you go.
Yeah, okay. So I think for me, the reference to the other Bond films didn't stand out that much to me, but I could totally get how they could for anyone else. I did not notice the whistling midget.
No?
Quite as much.
Go back and watch.
So I was able to separate this out, and I think to me what stands out about this film, that this is a very unique standalone Bond film that there's no other Bond film like this one. And, for better for worse, this makes it very unique. And I would say a special type of Bond film. It's a different Bond who only did it once. It's a different actor. And it feels very kind of stripped back. Like the closest Bond film to compare it to is Dr. No. And I think that's really interesting. I really like that. I think that's really cool. And my general feeling on George Lazenby is I actually did quite like him as Bond. As you know from the previous podcast, I kind of like the bit more calm version of Bond, and I don't really like the kind of super cocky way that sometimes Sean Connery played him. I think he went a bit too far in films like Goldfinger, and I kind of liked You Only Live Twice because he dialed it down a little bit. There was a bit more balance there, and I think George Lazenby not being that good of an actor and being very early to it naturally brings that because he can't do any better. Like it's almost like he's accidentally a Bond I actually can really get behind, because all he has to do is kind of look good and shoot dudes and have other people do the stunts, and it works. So for me, I think he does a good job. Yes, some of the dubbing is just kind of bad, and there are some lines that he delivers very poorly, but I think he looks the part, dresses the part, and kind of I can appreciate that about him. So I think he does a solid job, and he kind of adds to the mystique of this film and its kind of uniqueness. And overall, like you say, yeah, the action could be better, but there's still some action I really liked with the chases and stuff, and I think that stuff was really good. So for me, this comes down to the Dr. No baseline again. Did I like this more or less than Dr. No? And I think I took more from this film than that film. Like, I think there's just more that makes this kind of stand out that I did kind of end up enjoying. And, haven't even touched on Tracy. We've praised Diana Riggs enough, and she really elevates this film. And there's just more elements in this film that really work for me than Dr. No. So for me, my ranking currently, before putting on a Majesty Secret Service, is From Russia with Love, Thunderball, Dr. No, Goldfinger, You Only Live Twice. So for me, it's above Dr. No, but when I think, do I like it more than Thunderball? I think I probably had more fun with Thunderball. Like overall, it was just a more enjoyable experience. But on a Majesty Secret Service, again, does things its own way, which, again, bloody Bond films, they keep making different ones with a different feel, and it makes them hard to rank.
How dare they?
Oh, damn them. So yeah, again, it makes it hard to rank because it is so different. There is no direct comparison here. The closest is Dr. No, but this is still more polished and has a very different feel to it. So for me, it goes below Thunderball, but above Dr. No. Again, had more fun with Thunderball and more enjoyable and more bombastic, and I like the underwater stuff. But while this feels similar to Dr. No, I like how unique and different it is, and some of the performances and some of the stunts, to me, makes it a better film. So it goes at number 3 for me between Thunderball and Dr. No.
Oh, okay. It's good that we're now, our lists are starting to actually separate a little bit. We're getting past that initial hurdle of them maybe being quite similar. And
yeah, it took long enough. I think it was only the last episode where we did separate, but you having Goldfinger as your bottom one and not liking it is helping this out quite a bit.
Yep, that has not changed.
I was thought, like, is Joe going to say, no, I did quite like it? He's like, no.
No, I still like this more, so yeah.
Okay, cool. So that was on a Majesty Secret Service. That was quite a ride. Again, I very much enjoyed going back to this one. And it's such a unique film that this, to me, really made me think, like, I'm so glad we're doing this rewatch, because I never would have, like, got to experience this such different kind of version of Bond, for better or for worse. But I wouldn't got to have seen this again for a while if we didn't do this. So, it proved to me how much of a fun idea this is and how much I'm enjoying it.
I'm going to be enjoying it even more so next time. Oh, yes.
Yeah, because this is Live and Let Die next week, right?
You keep telling yourself that.
Well, I have to do the outro. I can't say it's not Live and Let Die. I can't say it wrong.
You can't lie to the audience, Tom.
I can't lie to I can lie to myself, but I can't lie to the audience.
Quite right.
All right, let's wrap this up. So thank you very much for listening to the Bond Revisited podcast. Please join us again next week when the Bond Revisited podcast will return with Diamonds Are Forever.